We'll see what that means. I think when the war ends, one thing he was very strong about, if it ends, he wants it to end. And that's President Putin said that. He wants it to end. He doesn't want to end it and then go back to fighting 6 months later. We talked about the possibility, I mentioned it, of a ceasefire so we can stop the killing. And I think we'll probably end up at some point getting a ceasefire in the not too distant future. President Putin wants to have peace now, and that's good. And he didn't want to have peace with Biden.
Was that conversation with Putin?
And you tell me why that is, okay?
Sir Keir Starmer has promised the largest house-building programme since the post-war era, with dozens of new towns built, he says, by British workers. More than 100 locations are being considered, each with at least 10,000 homes, as he vows to take on the NIMBYs and the blockers. His plans were inspired by King Charles' work on the sustainable town Nansildon in Cornwall, which he visited on Monday. The move has raised concerns, though, about dragging the King into politics just days before an announcement on building beautiful communities. But the Prime Minister insists he doesn't want to involve the monarch, only to deliver homes that give working people security. And 3 lynx illegally released in the Cairngorms are doing well, apparently, after a month in quarantine at Edinburgh Zoo. The young female cats were rescued in January after being spotted on the loose, while a 4th, a male, sadly died after capture. The zoo says they would likely have not survived in the wild and is now looking for a permanent home for them. For now, they've been named A, B and C, following a tradition dating back to the zoo's opening in 1913. Keepers have launched an appeal to help cover costs, saying support so far has been very encouraging. Those are the latest headlines for now. Plenty more up next with Charlie Peters, Tom and Emily on that breaking news in Munich.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 7 minutes past midday, and we're going to return straight to that breaking news out of Munich. Nearly 30 people have been injured, with 2 in a critical condition after a car drove through a large crowd in what police say is a suspected attack.
Yes, the arrested driver has now been confirmed as a 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker known to police.
Well, joining us now is our national reporter, Charlie Peters, because, Charlie, this is a curious incident. Firstly, we saw that picture there, a Mini Cooper, as this... I'm confused.
Yes, so usually when we've seen these sort of car ramming attacks, and we should stress this is now a suspected attack, you typically associate the vehicle to be something heavier than a Mini Cooper. And when we first saw that picture this morning, I think some people were a little bit confused as to whether this was a car ramming attack or perhaps an incident where someone could have had a medical issue and they were accelerating due to them perhaps passing out behind the wheel. There was some discussion in Munich about whether the person had confused the accelerator with the brake. But we have to say now, with more recent reports, that theory's support is dwindling, as it's been confirmed that a 24-year-old Afghan has been detained. The driver involved in the accident is an asylum seeker who has already been known to the police for drug and theft offences. And at a press conference in the last hour, the Bavarian Prime Minister Markus Söder said that this is suspected to be an attack. And he continued, "The attack shows that I have to change something in Germany, and quickly. It simply hurts when, as Prime Minister, he has an event in Aschaffenburg in January and now in Munich." He added, "It's just enough." And with regards to that other event he was referring to, on the 22nd of January, a 2-year-old boy and a man aged 41 were killed in a stabbing in a German park, and the police confirmed at the end of January that a 28-year-old man from Afghanistan was arrested following an attack in that Bavarian city as well. And we're seeing on your screens now the Mini Cooper involved in this incident, with the boot open clearly for the police to investigate. But I just want to draw your attention to the front. For those listening on the radio, the windscreen is severely damaged. The glass has been cracked quite aggressively. And we did hear reports from the Bild newspaper earlier this morning that shots had been fired, according according to eyewitnesses. And there were some reports that a police marksman had shot at the windscreen in an attempt to gain access to the vehicle to detain the driver. The doors were locked when people rushed to the car originally. That's what some eyewitnesses were telling local German media. And it was around 10:30 a.m. local time, or 9:30 in Britain, when the driver is said to have accelerated and sped into demonstrators on the Siedelstrasse, which is the road you're seeing here, a major arterial road coming out of Munich towards Dachau. Now, police investigations were working urgently to clarify whether he drove into the crowd intentionally or confused the accelerator and the brake, but it appears now, after that press conference, what we've heard from the Bavarian police and the Prime Minister, that this is a suspected attack, and that theory has really dwindled in its relevance.
OK, and the man arrested, 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker. Do we know, I'm not sure if we do yet, but do we know if he had been granted asylum in Germany? I ask because clearly he's been caught with other offences. You say drug and theft offences. Question why he was allowed to stay in Germany rather than deported, perhaps.
Yeah, all we know at this stage is that the alleged perpetrator is an asylum seeker from Afghanistan who's known to police. We don't know if he's been granted asylum. More details we expect will come out on that later. And as you say, at least 30 injured, some of them critically. A local daily newspaper called Süddeutsche was reporting about an hour ago that one woman had been killed. We've not had that verified by the local authorities. We also have been told that a child's life was in danger. Some eyewitnesses saying at the time of this incident that a mother and a child, and possibly also a man, were underneath that Mini Cooper when it came to a halt, having rammed into that crowd of people. And many at home will be asking, who were the people on the street? Who was on the Siedelstrasse? That was of the Verdi rally. This is a significant trade union in Germany, the second largest. They're currently going through a major walkout strike in a pay dispute. They're asking for an 8% rise, and it's led to at least 1,000 people were on the streets there. But yeah, so as it stands, at least 30 seriously injured, some of them critically, some unconfirmed reports of deaths there as well, and a 24-year-old Afghan has been detained.
OK, well, Charlie, do stay with us. We're going to go over to Berlin now, where Julian Reichelt, the editor-in-chief of News, is for us. Because, Julian, this is a really significant moment in Germany. Just can you lay out the context? We're 10 days away from a federal legislative election.
Exactly. We're 10 days away from the federal election here in Germany. And the number one topic of this election already has been illegal immigration. There hasn't been a month now without a severe attack. We had an attack on a Christmas market, similar attack, car driving through a Christmas market by a man from Saudi Arabia in December. Then we had an attack by an Afghan man only a few weeks ago in January on children, a group of kindergarten children in a beautiful park in Bavaria. A child was killed with stabs to the throat. And now, only a few weeks later, this attack in Munich. And this will definitely turn on the heat on all parties that have carried a completely failed and deadly policy of illegal immigration since 10 years, for a decade, since Angela Merkel opened the borders in 2015. All parties except the right-wing AfD have carried that policy for the past 10 years. You know, they've promised to make changes. They have promised to get tougher on illegal immigration. And again, this is one of the cases we're talking about here. All the people who are coming from Afghanistan and who request asylum will in most cases never get it. They still get to stay in Germany. And this, you know, more and more frequently is the result of it. So, you know, this campaign already has been about immigration only and about these kind of violent attacks. And that will intensify in the last 10 days before the election on February 23rd here.
Yeah, I mean, Julian, there have been an astonishing number of attacks by refugees and asylum seekers in Germany in just the last couple of years. You talk about illegal migration, but presumably these people were invited into the country.
Well, at least they were attracted by, a great welfare state. Obviously, when you cross into Germany on your feet, you're not in danger. Crossing from Poland, you're crossing from Austria, you're crossing from France. You're not crossing into Germany from a war zone. You're not fleeing into Germany. And that's what our law says. There is no legal way to cross into Germany on feet because there is no country at war around Germany. So, whoever is coming here has...
I know, Julian, but I'm just saying I cast my mind back to Angela Merkel's decision, for example, to allow Syrian refugees.
Yes. Angela Merkel, during the times of the Syrian war, sent out that signal of open borders, and that signal wasn't only happily accepted by people who were actually fleeing war, but by many, many other people, and it has been perpetuated for the past 10 years. And the truth is, we have no idea who's coming here. The people who are coming, rarely have documents, rarely have papers, rarely have passports. They throw them away. We have no idea who's coming into our country. And this is a pretty obvious result. A major attack per month now for the past quarter of a year. It is a pretty staggering sign of I would say the biggest failure in political history in Germany after the war.
This is a hugely significant moment. Of course, we've now started calling this a suspected attack. That is following the words of Markus Söder, the Minister-President of Bavaria, who gave a press conference not so long ago. Also in that press conference, we learn not just that this is now being treated as a suspected attack, but the Minister-President was saying that things need to change. Obviously, he's a significant figure within the CDU-CSU political coalition, currently leading in the polls. What is the policy of that sort of centre-right in Germany? What could change after the general election?
Look, all I have left in me, and I'm sorry if that comes across as a bit of cynical, is to laugh, because the CDU was the creator of this policy. Now they have promised, after our last attack, where a child was stabbed in the throat, they are ready to change something, and they would even do it with the majority that exists in parliament to change that with the AfD. So they've promised to do that. Only days after, they backtracked that and they said, we're only going to change that policy if the Social Democrats and the Green Party, the two left parties in parliament, agree to do it with us. We're not going to do it with the existing majority of that party on the right, with the AfD. So the truth is, nothing is going to change. They have said that they are only willing to do that with left parties that are not willing to change anything about it. These parties, at their core, have open borders and those deadly policies. The CDU, publicly said they're committed to changing it, but they don't have a majority, and they're not willing to accept the existing majority to the truth is, save people's lives, protect people's lives.
And Julian, it's easy to say you change. It's easy to say you'd like to change something now, but I imagine a lot of the German public wanted something to change a long time ago. Julian Reichelt, thank you very much indeed. We will be bringing you updates on this developing story throughout the afternoon, so stick with us.
Elsewhere, of course, back in this country, Sir Keir Starmer has received a less than warm welcome by farmers today. He attempted to visit a housing project in Milton Keynes.
Yes, the Prime Minister had to be airlifted to safety by a helicopter. The protest is, of course, the latest in a series of demonstrations by farmers against changes to inheritance tax in the budget. As you can see, the tractors arrived. There they are. They were tooting their horns and various tunes. And Keir Starmer had to make a dash for it.
Well, joining us now is the farmer James Wright, because, James, we are seeing increasingly visible tactics being used by the farming community. Was this appropriate? Was this right?
Well, the Countryside Alliance made it clear that until the elephant in the room, the family farm tax, is sorted, that Labour ministers wouldn't be welcome in the countryside. Now, that doesn't mean that they're unsafe, but it means that they will be made to be felt uncomfortable and unwelcome. And I think making so much noise that Keir Starmer can't do his media interviews at the end of his visit is probably inappropriate. action, given the scale of damage the family farm tax will do to British farming and the nation's food security.
I understand this particular group was Farmers to Action. I mean, there are quite a few. I was at the protest on, was it Monday? Yes, Monday. I know you were there too in Whitehall, and there are all sorts of different groups. I imagine some will be more militant than others, James.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, farmers are united in one voice that the family farm tax and that Labour in general are destroying the countryside. And it's so important that as all these groups come together, that we focus our energy against Labour, against Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, and that we leave the public, don't disrupt the public. And don't block the food supply chain. And that is the key message from everyone, that this is within Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves' power to reverse. We've got the spring statement next month, and we so hope that they're going to announce either a softening or a U-turn, because otherwise things like this will carry on happening. The farmers who were there today are the same farmers who were there in London, and wherever Keir Starmer goes, the farmers will be following.
Yeah, I mean, James, it does seem as though the tactic from the government is to sort of ignore the issue. Just sort of hope that it blows over.
Yeah. But if you, I mean, I just had my neighbour come round for a cup of coffee this morning. He was born in the farmhouse. His father was born in that farmhouse before him. He does not care that that farm is worth a lot of money. He will never, ever sell it. He never wants to sell it. It's the family crown jewels passed down between generation to generation. He earns less than minimum wage. He lives an incredibly simple life. But because Labour and Keir Starmer do not understand that farming is not profitable, that these are not businesses, these are family dynasties, that they cannot afford to pay the family farm tax. It's not that farmers don't want to pay tax, they pay income tax, they pay VAT, all sorts. It's that the inheritance tax does not stack up. Food production is not profitable enough. And governments since for the last 30 years have known that. It's just this government have come in and decided to change it. And this will not stop. This will carry on going.
Here's the bleak irony of this tax, that because so many farmers have been sitting on land that through no action of their own has just been part of this asset bubble that we've experienced in this country, the value of the land that they bought for not very much is now worth so much more. Ironically, this could be the only tax ever implemented that makes the person who is being taxed a lot of money, because suddenly people will have to sell their farms, sell all of this land, and they'll be very rich in cash terms because of that. But they'll have lost something culturally, something socially. They'll be worse off as individuals, even though on an Excel spreadsheet they'll look better off.
Absolutely, and this is what the Treasury don't understand. They sat down there and they've done their spreadsheets and they think this is wonderful. There's loads of money in the countryside. But the reality is it's an asset bubble, and the farmers never want to realise that asset. If you sell your farm, that is your culture gone, who you are, your identity, your everything. But the fact is that the farmers working the land are the ones producing the food. They're the ones protecting the environment. And the companies that will come in and buy these farms, they won't have the same aims. They won't employ people who have young families in our village schools, who use our pubs and village shops. This isn't just the nation's food security under threat. It's family farms and it's the communities that go around them. That is why farmers are so passionate. That's why there were 1,500 tractors on Monday. That is why those farmers who I know were in Milton Keynes today travelled all the way from Oxford or beyond to meet their horns so that Keir Starmer had to be evacuated in a helicopter. This will not end until they reverse the family farm tax, because it means so much to farmers. This is their livelihoods, but it's also their culture and their identity. And for some farmers, those farms have been passed down generation to generation.
OK, well, James Wright, thank you very much indeed. You are, of course, a farmer down in beautiful southwest of England. OK, well, what do you think at home? gbnews.com/your say. Do you think the tractors, the farmers, have every right to make a noisy protest at a... what was it? A
housing
visit.
Development.
A housing development visit on the day of the housing. Or do you think Keir Starmer was running scared? Was he running scared?
Do Do you know what
I think he was, yeah. He should have said something to them.
He should have walked up to them.
Yeah.
He should have given them some time, and then he could have got on with the visit. I think they're farmers are generally agreeable people.
Yeah.
You know, if he'd have gone over and had a bit of a word with them, gave them some time, I'm sure he could have continued with the visit.
Yeah, it looks a bit pathetic,
Well,
doesn't
we'll
it?
get much more on this and all the other stories with our own political correspondent live on Downing Street after this.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, joining us in the studio now is Chia Eaglin and Erin Cobb from Clark's Farm Greyhound Rescue, who have brought along 2 very special guests. This is Duchess.
So Duchess
and
is the
Vieira.
one I'm stroking. This is Duchess, isn't it? Our lady
And then
joining
we've
us
got-
this morning, and then over there is Vieira.
Vieira's a chap, isn't he? And Duchess is a lady. So,
Talk
guys,
to us about their history. Now, they used to be racing dogs, didn't they? But now they're looking for a home.
Yeah, so both of these dogs were racing greyhounds. They have retired recently. So now we are getting them ready and prepared to go into a forever home, essentially.
So anyone watching, make sure you get on the Clark's Farm website later on today, because these guys are up for adoption. And I mean,
And they are very
look
cute.
how gorgeous.
Look how well behaved they are as
Look
well.
at you.
They were a little bit excited when they came in because it's their first time on TV and
I know.
they wanted to make a good impression.
They did.
But now
She's tired.
Now they're
naturals.
both looking, aren't they? They
It's a
know what's up
tiring
on
one.
the
Yawning
top
already.
here. Now, talk to us about greyhounds as a breed. If anyone was going to adopt a greyhound, what would they expect?
I'd say the first thing is couch potatoes. They are the most lazy dog ever.
Really? You wouldn't expect that because of the background?
Everyone has this massive misconception that they need loads of exercise, loads of walks, but they are actually, you know, quite happy with 2 20-minute walks a day. They are
Really?
so laid
Wow.
back.
Yeah.
Easy.
That's
As long as
surprising.
they're able to have their moments of madness, zoomies, you know, they do
still
get
are
the
busy.
sillies,
Oh,
of
yeah.
course. But once they've had that, they are so happy to just chill out on the sofa with you. Usually,
They've all got different personalities, and it's just great to see, even though some of them...
Duchess is perched on the back of your
She's got a
head.
headrest.
Duchess is going to fall asleep. You're on TV, Duchess.
She's watching.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
OK, good afternoon, Britain. It is 12:27 and we're going to bring you some live shots from Munich, the aftermath of a horrific incident that has left at least 28 people injured. There you can see debris left on the street in central Munich just one day ahead of a massive security conference in the city there in Bavaria. We understand that the man arrested, the driver of the car, is a 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker.
Now, he has been arrested. He is alive, and the authorities say he poses no further risk to the country, to the people, because he is incapacitated and locked away. But this raises so many questions. This was an individual that was clearly on the radar of the authorities, had been arrested for offences in the past. And it is perhaps the identity of this 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker that has led the authorities to now call this a suspected attack. When this first took place, a lot of us was thinking, could this have been a terrible accident? Could this have been just something that went horribly, horribly wrong? But the more information we learn, the more deliberate this begins to look.
And as you can see there, if you're watching on television, you can see what appears to be the remnants of a buggy or a pram, which is pretty harrowing, and also debris from the event. We know that there were a group of trade unionists who were attacked by this, well, were rammed by this car. A relatively small car, a Mini Cooper, but clearly has done a huge amount of damage. There you can see the Mini Cooper there with its boot open, the police, of course, investigating, and the front window has been smashed through. The police have said that there was a shot made at the time.
Yes, and there were many reports as to when those shots were fired, but it does seem that the only people who did fire shots at this incident, as far as we now know, were indeed the police, and that was to incapacitate the suspected attacker. Some really serious goings on here, because it's not, of course, just the Munich Security Conference that kicks off tomorrow, attended by people like the US Vice President J.D. Vance, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, world leaders, defence ministers from across Europe, all going to this conference, a really significant global event, but also just 10 days out from the German national general election. And that is a really significant point where we see both the centre-right CDU, CSU and the further-right Alternative for Deutschland parties ahead in the polls.
OK, well, we will bring you any updates as and when we get them. But we're going to head to Downing Street and speak to our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who's been briefed by the Prime Minister's spokesman. Where to start, Catherine?
Yes, indeed. Well, the government would like to be talking about housing. I have to tell you, housing was not mentioned at all. We had a light sprinkling of the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, those growth figures out 0.1%. Pretty lacklustre, to put it mildly, but a lot of questions about timings of her CV and how long she was at particular places. Also allegations of improper use of expenses. Frankly, the Prime Minister's official spokesman did not want to go there. He wouldn't get into it. We asked him what was the difference between Louise Haigh, the Transport Secretary, who'd had to resign over things that had happened before she was in office. Answer came there none. But really, the whole 90%, I would say, of the last 45 minutes that I've spent in this briefing were about Donald Trump and Ukraine, following that news that he had a 90-minute conversation with Vladimir Putin yesterday. He spoke, of course, to Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, shortly after that. But Donald Trump has said clearly he wants the war to end. And in intensive questions from journalists to the Prime Minister's spokesman, all that we could really get was a continued assurance that the Prime Minister wants this barbaric war to end, as does Donald Trump. But of course, there are huge points of difference here. The Defence Secretary, Pete Hegseth, yesterday in the States effectively said that Europe wasn't going to get much help, certainly not in terms of peacekeeping forces in Ukraine, that they had other priorities, that Europe fundamentally needs to stand on its own 2 feet. Also, that Ukraine cannot expect to go back to the size that it was prior to 2014. So it does seem like whatever peace deal ends up happening, Ukraine are set to lose territory. It doesn't feel like Ukraine are going to have much say in the matter, despite the fact that over and over again we hear that the UK and the whole of Europe wants to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position. The US has now ruled out NATO membership for Ukraine going forward too. I honestly felt a little bit like we'd sort of fallen through the looking glass, because what's clearly a very different approach from this new incoming president to that of Europe. The Prime Minister's official spokesman, they just do not want to criticise Donald Trump, because he is, of course, the most powerful man in the world. And we are also mindful of a potential trade deal and, tariffs that he might choose to impose upon us.
Pretty stark how the European countries can't defend Ukraine by themselves because they don't spend anywhere near as the amount that the United States spends on its own military. The United States spends £753 billion on its military. We spend around 50 or 60 on ours. It's just a different scale. No wonder we're at the beck and call of the President of the United States on this.
OK, well, Catherine Forster, thank you very much indeed. Our political correspondent there outside Downing Street. Now, we do have a lot more coming up on today's show, including this shocking story of a Nigerian woman who joined a terror organisation to apparently boost her UK asylum claim. This is just absolutely maddening. That's after the headlines with Sam.
Very good afternoon to you. Just after 12:30, the top story this lunchtime. A car has ploughed into a crowd in Munich, leaving at least 28 people injured, some of them critically. German police have arrested a 24-year-old asylum seeker who was detained at the scene. Officials say the suspect was known to police for theft and drug offences. Authorities also say the driver was alone, but eyewitnesses had reported 2 men seen in that Mini Cooper. Munich police have now sealed off the area and confirmed there is no further danger, though the cause of the crash remains unclear. Well, the mayor of Munich has described the incident as deeply shocking, with children among the injured. It comes just days before the Munich Security Conference, where world leaders, including Ukraine's president, are set to gather. Figures released this morning show the economy unexpectedly grew at the end of last year, but GDP per head still fell. Growth between October and December last year was 0.1%, better than expected after stagnation in the previous 3 months. The data was compiled by the Office for National Statistics and is subject to revision. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has pledged to go further and faster with her plan to put more money in people's pockets. However, the Conservatives accuse the Labour government of killing growth. The NHS waiting list in England has dropped for the 4th month in a row, now at its lowest level since April 2023. Figures show 7.46 million treatments were waiting at the end of December, down slightly from November's total and well below last year's peak. Long waits are also falling. Patients waiting over a year for treatment are at their lowest since 2020. But more than 2,000 people had been waiting over 18 months, a number that's barely changed. The government aims to eliminate year-long waits by March of this year and reduce them further by 2026. Passengers on the Elizabeth line in London are facing major disruption as train drivers prepare for 4 days of strikes over pay. The ASLEF union says its members will walk out for 24 hours on the 27th of February, March the 1st, the 8th and March the 10th. The union accuses Transport for London of failing to offer a fair pay deal. It's the latest in a long-running dispute, with Londoners now warned to expect severe delays. And the Defence Secretary says there will be no talks about Ukraine without Ukraine, as John Healey insists Kyiv must be in the strongest position to negotiate. NATO's new General Secretary also says a peace deal must prevent Russia from trying to seize more land in the future. It follows Donald Trump claiming that he and Vladimir Putin had agreed to start talks on ending the war immediately. That's the news on GB News. I'll be back with you in half an hour, and Tom and Emily will be straight back with you after this.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Another cloudy day ahead, occasional showers, but likely to see a few more brighter interludes compared to recent days, though it is still going to be remaining chilly. That's because we're still under the influence of an easterly flow across much of the country, making things feel chilly. That's away from the far southwest later, though, where we'll start to introduce some milder air. For many, though, there is still going to be plenty of cloud around, the best of the brightness across the far north and northwest of Scotland. But as I say, there should be some brighter interludes at times. That's away from the far southwest, though. We'll start to see thicker clouds spilling into parts of Cornwall, perhaps even some patchy rain later too. And temperatures just below average for the time of year, so it is going to be feeling chilly, particularly around any exposed North Sea coast where we see the brisk breeze. Now, heading into this evening and overnight, thicker clouds starting to spill into parts of Cornwall, some patchy rain arriving later. Elsewhere, it should be largely dry, plenty of cloud around, similar across Northern Ireland, a cloudy but dry end to the day. Still those clear spells clinging on to the far north and northwest of Scotland, so that's where it's going to turn particularly chilly, likely to see some frost overnight, and some showers moving into the northeast of Scotland too, where they'll likely fall as snow across hills. Now, this area of rain will continue to push its way northeastwards, moving into parts of Northern Ireland, southern parts of Wales and the southwest, where we could start to see some snow as it falls across higher ground, maybe in some freezing rain. So do take care for some icy stretches during the morning, and still some clear spells as we head into the overnight period. So once again, there could be some patchy frost, and some towns and cities just about dropping below freezing. So a chilly start for most as we head into Friday. Still cloud and outbreaks of rain slowly pushing their way northeastward. Still a chance we could see some freezing rain, so once again a risk of some icy stretches. But elsewhere, some patchy cloud, but likely to see more sunshine break through that cloud as we head into tomorrow. It is still going to be remaining chilly though, highs of around 4 to 5.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. There's disruption to some Calmac, Outer Hebrides and Firth of Clyde sailings this morning because of poor weather conditions. There are delays from up to an hour to Stena Line sailings between Cairnryan and Belfast for operational reasons. In East Yorkshire, the A1035 is closed each way northeast of Beverley between Ticton and Hull Bridge after an accident causing queues. The M11 from Cambridgeshire into Essex is closed southbound from junction 10 at Duxford all the way down to 7A north of Harlow after a couple of accidents. There are long delays towards there, and as you divert, there's disruption to a number of flights to and from Belgium today because of industrial action there. And in East Sussex, the A21 is closed in both directions off the A28 between Hastings and Johns Cross after an accident causing delays. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just gone 20 to 1, and a woman who joined a prescribed terror organisation in Nigeria, well, she's been given asylum in the UK.
Yeah, the 49-year-old had tried and failed 8 times to secure asylum in this country and was only given the right to stay once she joined the separatist group called the Indigenous People of Biafra. Right.
Well, joining us now is the former Chief Immigration Officer at UK Border Force, Kevin Saunders. Kevin, please explain this to me. She was refused time after time after time after time for asylum and then joined a terrorist organisation and suddenly was accepted. Is this really how the system works?
This is absolutely ridiculous. It's because we have so many lawyers. It's because we're funding the lawyers to do this. The Tories actually wanted to introduce legislation where you got one chance to apply for asylum, and that was it. I mean, this case is just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean,
this rates up alongside the chicken nuggets episode, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely it does. Absolutely it does. It always seems to come down to the European Court of Human Rights. Doesn't it? Somehow these lawyers, as you say, manage to, in my view, manipulate the law so as sometimes foreign criminals, this Nigerian woman who had already had her case rejected 8 times. I mean, why are you even allowed to claim 8 times, Kevin?
Well, you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be. And as I say, the Conservatives wanted a one chance opportunity to do it. But of course, they're not in power anymore. So we're back to having as many times as the lawyers will do it.
I mean, yesterday we were talking about a judge who had allowed a family from Gaza to resettle in this country using the Ukrainian refugee scheme, resettlement scheme, he used an extremely expansionary view of the law, again, the ECHR. I mean, what do we do about this, Kevin? Do we need to come out of the ECHR? Because you've got the Conservative Shadow Home Secretary, Minister Chris Philp, saying, oh, you know, this is a ludicrous interpretation of the ECHR. But we seem to have ludicrous interpretations of the ECHR every single day.
We do. And the only sensible answer is to come out of the ECHR. But we won't, because the Prime Minister is a lawyer. And because he's a lawyer, he likes the ECHR. So he won't take the UK out, where it is painfully obvious that we want to come out and we need to come out. This would not have happened in almost every other European country. I cannot see this happening having happened in Germany. This woman would have been on the plane after the first.
Doesn't this get to the difficulty when it comes to our interpretation and, frankly, gold plating of these European rulings? We know that Emmanuel Macron has recently passed laws that have been slammed by human rights lawyers. He's happy to deport people against the wishes of many lawyers and the legal establishment in France. And, of course, it wasn't always like this in the United Kingdom. The ECHR passed down a ruling saying that we must introduce prisoner voting in the UK at the turn of the last decade, around 2010. And what happened? We passed an Act of Parliament telling the ECHR where to go and stick it. And we didn't introduce prisoner voting. I mean, it does seem that when there is the political will, you can just tell this organisation, frankly, where to go.
What you've got to realise is, particularly in France, it's France first and the ECHR and what Europe says second. I mean, one of the favourite sayings of the French is, if you don't like what we're doing, we'll see you in court. And the court case may happen 10 years further down the road, because and by then everybody's forgotten about it. So the French, it's France first. Unfortunately, in the UK, at the moment, with this government, it isn't. And I strongly believe that it's because Starmer is a lawyer, and therefore he likes things like the ECHR and letting his legal friends do what they want to do. I mean,
yeah, we know the Attorney General. We know the Attorney General as well thinks very highly of the ECHR. There's absolutely no chance of us leaving it, or indeed, you know, denying the results of it as well. Kevin Saunders, thank you very much indeed, former Chief Immigration Officer at the UK Border Force. We'll have to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed. Let us know your thoughts.
Now, if you're in search of some winter sun, perhaps you want to get away by small boat. Here's the forecast for some of those top European holiday destinations.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
We have some heavy thundery rain affecting eastern parts of the Mediterranean at the moment. Meanwhile, there is also a band of rain pushing in from the west tomorrow, affecting parts of Madeira later on and pushing into the far west of Spain and Portugal as well. Also some hefty rain affecting Italy, but it's around the Adriatic coastline where we're going to have some heavy thundery downpours, even some significant snow for Croatia in particular, with 10 to 20 centimetres even to lower levels. Elsewhere, a mostly fine story.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's now 10 to 1, and football fans heading to the 2034 World Cup in Saudi Arabia won't be able to grab a beer, or any alcohol for that matter, while at the competition.
Well, that is a long time off, isn't it? Long time away.
Yeah.
Things could have changed. Who knows?
Let's hope that's a U-turn.
The news was confirmed by the Saudi ambassador to the United Kingdom, who said the kingdom was happy to accommodate people within the boundaries of their culture, but was adamant that the culture would not be changed for others.
Culture not changed for others? Like bringing in British sport?
Yeah, interesting, isn't it?
Well, let's dampen the mood. Let's ask the former footballer and broadcaster Mickey Quinn. Mickey, I mean, this is going to be a big disappointment for many football fans.
Oh, massive disappointment, especially for the British fans that are going to travel over there. But it is a worldwide event, and you know, football's a massive entertainment, as we know, big corporate. And if you're travelling halfway around the world and you want to visit a country for a World Cup tournament, then you want to sample the food, you want to have a drink. It's an entertainment business, and I think it's usually disappointing for any football fan, not just the British football fans.
Well, I mean, Mickey, Saudi Arabia has been making, you know, progressive changes in recent years. Women are now allowed to drive. They're now allowed to attend sport events. So perhaps by the time we get to 2034, you know, people are going to have the beers and the margaritas aplenty.
I certainly hope so, but at this moment in time, it doesn't look likely because they're very strict on the drink issue. I mean, Saudi, what they've done now, you know, they're getting huge sporting events, obviously the World Cup 2034, big boxing events we've seen, big golf tournaments, and they haven't relaxed at all on any drink whatsoever. But if you think of the numbers of British fans, English fans that are going to go over there, they'll be looking for a drink somewhere. They got one, by the way, Tom and Emily, in 2022 in Qatar. If you remember there was designated areas, and hotels were licensed, certain ones, and even you could go offshore in a moored boat and have a drink just to get one down your neck, really.
Yeah, I think that's what they do in Dubai as well.
Like the Maldives.
But Mickey, I mean, as you are saying, Saudi Arabia is buying up more and more sporting events and sporting teams, clubs. I mean, they clearly see that as a country, part of their global influence will be influence over global sport. At what point do we need to have a conversation about what the norms are, not just in one country or another, but actually across the world for this?
Well, it seems at the moment that it's their culture that is standing out the most above anyone else's. I just can't see why they can't be like Qatar, where there was designated areas. You've got to respect they are in their country. They paid, my goodness, millions and billions to host this World Cup event. But do they want people to go? Do they want people to attend? Do they want to be proud of their tournament? Then if they are, then they've got to relent a little bit, and they've got to let people relax and enjoy it, like you said, with the food, the drink, or whatever.
I think a lot of people would agree with you. Mickey Quinn, thank you very much indeed for talking us through this one. It would be a shame not to be able to get a beer. I wonder how many Brits will go all the way to Saudi Arabia.
I'm just scared that many Brits will go, try and bring alcohol and end up in prison.
Car crash.
No. Well, do stay with us. Much more on Munich after this.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Another cloudy day ahead, occasional showers, but likely to see a few more brighter interludes compared to recent days, though it is still going to be remaining chilly. That's because we're still under the influence of an easterly flow across much of the country, making things feel chilly. That's away from the far southwest later, though, where we'll start to introduce some milder air. For many, though, there is still going to be plenty of cloud around, the best of the brightness across the far north and northwest of Scotland. But as I say, there should be some brighter interludes at times. That's away from the far southwest, though. We'll start to see thicker clouds spilling into parts of Cornwall, perhaps even some patchy rain later too. And temperatures just below average for the time of year, so it is going to be feeling chilly, particularly around any exposed North Sea coast where we see the brisk breeze. Now, heading into this evening and overnight, thicker clouds starting to spill into parts of Cornwall, some patchy rain arriving later. Elsewhere, it should be largely dry, plenty of cloud around, similar across Northern Ireland, a cloudy but dry end to the day. Still those clear spells clinging on to the far north and northwest of Scotland, so that's where it's going to turn particularly chilly, likely to see some frost overnight, and some showers moving into the northeast of Scotland too, where they'll likely fall as snow across hills. Now, this area of rain will continue to push its way northeastwards, moving into parts of Northern Ireland, southern parts of Wales and the southwest, where we could start to see some snow as it falls across higher ground, maybe in some freezing rain. So do take care for some icy stretches during the morning, and still some clear spells as we head into the overnight period. So once again, there could be some patchy frost, and some towns and cities just about dropping below freezing. So a chilly start for most as we head into Friday. Still cloud and outbreaks of rain slowly pushing their way northeastward. Still a chance we could see some freezing rain, so once again a risk of some icy stretches. But elsewhere, some patchy cloud, but likely to see more sunshine break through that cloud as we head into tomorrow. It is still going to be remaining chilly though, highs of around 4 to 5.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. First, you'll win a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash to spend however you like. You'll also receive the very latest iPhone 16, and we'll send you on a shopping spree with £500 to spend in your favourite store. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Newly released MI5 files reveal that Queen Elizabeth II was kept in the dark over the treachery of a senior courtier.
Yeah, for almost a decade. This is Sir Anthony Blunt, who played a double life, passing intelligence, the KGB, during World War II as a senior MI5 officer. But, remarkably, he was allowed to keep his position amid fears of a major scandal if the truth came out.
Well, now those files have been released by the National Archives, which includes the Queen's response to finding out a trusted member like Anthony Blunt was really a traitor.
Well, joining us now in the studio is GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Good to see you this morning, Cameron. This is astonishing.
Oh, absolutely. And this wasn't a little spy. This was Anthony Blunt was a full-blown spy. He passed to the Soviets the D-Day deception plans during the Second World War. He was working for MI5, but a double agent for the KGB as well.
The wrong plans.
He passed on the plans.
The wrong ones.
The wrong one in 1944. Yeah. Exactly. But he then got a job inside Buckingham Palace as one of the Queen's most trusted aides and courtiers, the surveyor of her art, essentially like kind of an art advisor for her late Majesty. There was always suspicions about Anthony Blunt way back in the early 50s because he was part of this notorious Cambridge spy ring, a group of 5 boys recruited at Cambridge. 2 of these people fled to Moscow in 1951. Anthony stayed behind in London and subsequently got a job inside Buckingham Palace, and it wasn't until 1964 that he confessed to his treachery. The reason he confessed was because he was granted immunity.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Thursday, the 13th of February. I'm Emily Carr.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Well, at least 28 people injured, several critically, as a car ploughs into pedestrians in Munich, just one day before a major security conference is set to begin.
Seeing live pictures here from Munich as police have now confirmed the man arrested was a 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker, adding the incident is now a suspected attack. We'll have the very latest.
Elsewhere, the Great Escape. The Prime Minister receives a warm country welcome, as he's forced to abandon a Buckinghamshire visit due to a farmers' protest, with some of the tractors sounding musical horns while the Prime Minister spoke to workers at the site. We're speaking to farmers throughout the show. Was the move justified?
And we'll also bring you the shocking story of a Nigerian woman who tried and failed 8 times to secure asylum in Britain. She failed, so she joined a terror organisation, and of course, then she was let straight in. It really beggars belief.
It does indeed. And is it the dry desert? Saudi Arabia's UK ambassador confirms no alcohol whatsoever will be provided or allowed during the 2034 World Cup. How much could this affect the tournament? And should the kingdom be more accommodating to those who like a tipple?
Look, I'm not defending the Opium Wars. I think, in general, it was a bad thing that we, went in and got the Chinese people hooked on opium and then forced them to continue to allow opium imports. But it did speak of a time when Britain was able to tell countries to accept imports of drink and drugs. In a way that I don't think we any longer have that sort of power. And hearing that story with Saudi Arabia sort of banning drink in the World Cup, in the Football World Cup, a game that Britain invented, I just think that if this was 100 years ago, we'd probably sent the Navy in right now and just told them, allow the booze.
Gosh, OK. Well, that was a roundabout way of saying let the booze in, Saudi Arabia. I don't know. I think they made a good point, to be fair. This is our culture. We're going to stick with it. If only Britain did the same sometimes.
Not if you're
Might be quite nice.
Not if you're hosting a global event.
Yeah, but it's our fault. It's if the West, where people drink, want to have the World Cup, then they need to cough up the money for it, don't they? Saudi's only getting it because they pay so much money towards it, isn't it?
Are you suggesting it was a bribe? Not a competitive process where they fairly squarely won?
I don't actually know how the process is, so maybe I should be quiet on that one. I don't want to accuse anyone of anything. Yes. But also on the old Scarpa Starmer. He had to evacuate by helicopter his housing development visit in Buckinghamshire because guess who turned up?
Oh, it was the farmers.
Yep. Tooting their horns, singing their songs. And, yes, Keir Starmer, he's made a habit of this, hasn't he? Sort of scarpering from various things.
Perhaps he should have anticipated. I mean, Buckinghamshire isn't the most urban county in the United Kingdom. I mean, there are quite a few agricultural businesses there that will be affected by his tax rise. Perhaps he should have expected that some farmers might have turned up.
Helicopter, I mean, seriously. Anyway, let's get the headlines with Sam.
Tom, Emily, thank you very much, and good afternoon to you. The top story this lunchtime: a car has ploughed into a crowd in Munich, leaving at least 28 people injured, some of them critically. German police have arrested a 24-year-old asylum seeker who was detained at the scene. Officials say the suspect was known to the police for theft and drug offences. Authorities also say the driver was alone, but eyewitnesses had reported to local media that two men were seen in the Mini Cooper. Munich police have now sealed off the area and confirmed there is no further danger to the public, though the cause of the crash remains unclear. The mayor of Munich described the incident as deeply shocking, with children believed to be among those injured. It comes just days before the Munich Security Conference, where world leaders, including Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, are set to gather. Figures released this morning showed that the economy unexpectedly grew at the end of last year, but GDP per head still fell. Growth between October and December last year was 0.1%, better than expected after stagnation in the previous 3 months. The data was compiled by the Office for National Statistics and is subject to revision. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has pledged to go further and faster with her plan to put more money in people's pockets. But the Conservatives accuse the government of killing growth. Well, here's what the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, had to say about those GDP figures earlier today.
The growth numbers have come in higher than many expected, but I'm still not satisfied with the level of growth that our economy is achieving, and that's why I am determined to go further and faster in delivering the economic growth and the improvements in living standards that our country deserves.
The NHS waiting list in England has dropped for the 4th month in a row, now at its lowest level since April 2023. Figures show 7.46 million treatments were waiting at the end of December, down slightly from November's total and well below last year's peak. Long waits are also falling. Patients waiting over a year for treatment are at their lowest since 2020. More than 2,000 people have been waiting over 18 months, a number that's barely changed. The government says it aims to eliminate year-long waits by March of this year and then reduce them further by 2026. In London, passengers on the Elizabeth line face major disruption as train drivers prepare for 4 days of strikes over pay. ASLEF says its members will walk out for 24 hours on the 27th of February, March the 1st, the 8th and March the 10th. The union accuses Transport for London of failing to offer a fair pay deal. It's the latest in a long-running dispute, with Londoners warned to expect severe delays. The Defence Secretary says there will be no talks about Ukraine without Ukraine, as John Healey insists Kyiv must be in the strongest possible position to negotiate. NATO's new Secretary-General also says any peace deal must prevent Russia from trying to seize more land. It follows Donald Trump claiming he and President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, have agreed to start talks on ending the war immediately.
We'll see what that means. I think when the war ends, one thing he was very strong about, if it ends, he wants it to end. And that's President Putin said that. He wants it to end. He doesn't want to end it and then go back to fighting 6 months later. We talked about the possibility, I mentioned it, of a ceasefire so we can stop the killing, and I think we'll probably end up at some point getting a ceasefire in the not-too-distant future. President Putin wants to have peace now, and that's good, and he didn't want to have peace with Biden.
Was that conversation with Putin?
And you tell me why that is, okay?
And the Prime Minister has promised the largest house-building programme since the post-war era, with dozens of new towns built by, he says, British workers. More than 100 locations are being considered, each with at least 10,000 homes, as he vows to take on the NIMBYs and the blockers. His plans were inspired by King Charles' work on the sustainable town of Nansildon in Cornwall, which he visited on Monday. The move, though, has raised concerns about dragging the king into politics just days before an announcement on building so-called beautiful communities. But Sir Keir Starmer insists he doesn't want to involve the monarch, only to deliver homes that give working people security and stability. That's the news on GB News. I'll be back with you for another look at the top stories in around half an hour. Now, though, it's over to Tom and Emily.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 1. We're going to return straight to that breaking news out of Munich. Nearly 30 people injured, 2 in a critical condition, all after a car drove through a large crowd, accelerating at the time, according to reports in what police are now calling a suspected attack.
Yes, the arrested driver has now been confirmed as a 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker known to police.
Well, in the last few minutes, the German Chancellor, yes, he still is the Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, has condemned the incident as a terrible attack.
He added that the suspect must be punished and must leave the country.
Well, Charlie Peters, our national reporter, is here in the studio with us. Charlie, some strong words from the Chancellor.
Yeah, and it comes, of course, there's been so many attacks in Germany over the last year in particular from asylum seekers. It comes today, this incident, as a trial starts for another Afghan suspected of having Islamist sympathies for charges of murder and attempted murder from that attack in Mannheim last May. But we're taking you back now to Munich, live at the scene, where we're getting a better understanding of what happened this morning at 10:30 a.m. local time in Munich. Now, it's been said that this vehicle on your screen, this Mini Cooper, approached the police as they were driving down the Siedelstrasse, which is the road going left to right you're seeing there, coming north of the central station in Munich. It was driving behind a police vehicle at the rear of this Verdi trade union rally. But then the vehicle approached, came up behind the police vehicle and then moved to overtake the vehicle, accelerated and reached the end of the rally, at which point it had struck some of those members of that march, some 1,000 people present on the streets of Munich to protest about a pay deal that they're seeking in the city. The exact number of people who've been injured has not yet been determined, but there are at least 28 people injured, some of them seriously. Eyewitnesses on the ground saying that they saw a woman and a child stuck underneath that car you're seeing now on your screens, that Mini Cooper, with, if you can see, just if you look very closely, the windscreen is severely damaged, and the police have now confirmed in the last hour that they did fire shots at that windscreen after the vehicle came to a halt in an attempt to get inside the vehicle because the doors were locked. We've also heard some reports that there could have been 2 men in the car. Again, the police haven't commented on that, but some eyewitnesses at the area telling local media that there were 2 men in the car. We don't know if one of them was injured after that shooting, but they did eventually detain the individual. I hope we can bring you some footage now of the moment that they detained this 24-year-old Afghan. We have this footage, I hope we had prepared it, of the moment he was detained, but perhaps we can't bring you that now. Never mind. But bringing you back to the scene now, as you can see, there are umbrellas and high-vis jackets all over the street. The pedestrian crossing in the middle of 3 lanes of traffic, cordoned off totally by the police. I believe there's a major dent in the roof and windscreen. One of the headlights have come off. The front bumper is broken. It looks like a pram is also strewn over the floor, and half a dozen umbrellas. And we were also being told by local media that all of the local businesses have been shut down because just a kilometre away is Munich's main railway station. So a 24-year-old Afghan detained after this suspected attack. And we've heard some pretty strong lines from local politicians, the Bavarian minister Markus Söder saying that this attack shows that I have to change something in Germany, and quickly. He said, it simply hurts when, as Prime Minister, there is an event in January where there were 2 people killed after a stabbing, and now this in Munich, 2 Bavarian cities. He says it's just enough, saying something desperately has to change. And that, of course, has been backed up by Olaf Scholz. So
what Olaf Scholz has had to say is very interesting. It sounds as though this incident and previous incidents of this nature may well expedite a change in policy when it comes to immigration. He says the government will be starting flights back to Afghanistan despite the lack of diplomatic ties. It's complicated because you can't fly them there directly, but this is something we'll continue to do, not just as a one-off, as a continuous thing. So it does sound as though Olaf Scholz is trying to convince the public there that there will be deportations.
Yeah, and that's been a major issue for the centre-right in Germany. They've been accused of giving in to what commentators outside of Germany and some inside called the far right. I think many people just refer to the FD as right wing. They have common sense immigration demands because, of course, there have been so many appalling security situations in the country as a consequence of foreign nationals, particularly asylum seekers, being involved in these appalling attacks. So we think about this car ramming incident at a Christian market in December. This is a familiar situation for Germans. It is a familiar sense of dread. And in 2016, a truck was driven into a Christmas market in Berlin. We've had this incident in December, and we've had this also occurring this morning in Munich. And this suspected attacker, this 24-year-old, was known to the police for theft and drug offences. We don't know the state of their asylum status, but from what we've just heard from Olaf Scholz saying they need to be removed, we presume that they haven't had that cleared. I think I can now bring you footage of the moment that 24-year-old was detained by the police. You can see it there, the man being held down by those officers. I've seen the footage in full. This is obviously just a still image, but for those listening on the radio, the man was taken out of that Mini Cooper, which you can see in the background, being held down by two officers. This has been shared by the Bild newspaper in Germany. And there was also a lot of damage around the vehicle. And at this moment, we were told there were people underneath the vehicle. That's what, according to eyewitnesses, in some of the really shocking footage we've seen around the car, which I've not been able to verify. You can see prams and strollers and people being covered in blankets after the emergency services arrive. And when you see that man being detained on the ground, it comes after the police shot at the car window in order to get access to the vehicle. And as I said, unconfirmed reports at this stage that there was another passenger in the car, two men up front. The Munich police have repeated that they secured the driver, but they've been unable to confirm reports that another person was involved, only giving us this image that we've seen so far separately, gathered by someone on the ground, not by local authorities, of that one man, a 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker, being detained. But as I say, witnesses have said, and so far all the witness reports that we've seen have been secured and backed up by local reports. Witnesses say that two men were in the car and police shot one of them. We're still waiting for official confirmation on that.
And the German public will know full well how these types of incidents seem to be becoming more frequent in Germany. I mean, back in 2016, a truck driven into a Christmas market in Berlin. Another attack last month, another attack the month before that, Christmas market, streets, stabbing attacks. It's just awful. Shall we speak for more reaction with Jochen Bittner, a correspondent for Die Zeit newspaper, one of the biggest newspapers in Germany. Jochen, thank you very much indeed. A shocking incident, but unfortunately, these types of incidents appear to be becoming more frequent in Germany.
Yes, good afternoon. Unfortunately, they are, and it's hard to stomach. And I mean, the last time you invited me on was indeed after this attack on the Christmas market in Magdeburg, and after that we did have another attack by a rejected asylum seeker in Aschaffenburg, in which two people were killed, one small boy among them. So just to give you a bit of political context, if I may, I mean, the Germans are headed to the polls. We have general elections coming up in 10 days. And the AfD that you mentioned, the right-wing or far-right party in the German parliament, they are the second biggest party in the polls right now. So, and just 2 weeks ago, the head of the Conservative Party, Friedrich Merz, who's bound to become the next chancellor, basically, he proposed in the German parliament tougher legislation on immigration. And this proposal was rejected by the still governing Social Democrats, mainly on the grounds that it would be too tough. The idea was that since you can't really deport people in sufficient numbers, you would have to reject asylum seekers at the German borders. And this was a proposal that the Social Democrats and the Green Party were not willing to support. And I think that this attack now will be, the main issue in the last couple of days in the run-up to the elections.
This is, of course, 10 days until Germany goes to the polls. Currently, the party of Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor, is in third place, according to the opinion polls. And it's the CDU-CSU, the former party of, the party of Merkel, the former Chancellor, of course, and the AfD, who's in second. This is going to be a pretty big winds of change election for Germany.
It is, and you can feel some of the vibe shift that has been described for the US in Germany as well. And I think the big task now for the political center would be to moderate this vibe shift and to channel the anger and the anxiety that the public feels into sensible, common sense policies. The AfD that you mentioned is a partly racist party. You have to keep that in mind. There are people in the AfD, I'm not saying all of them, but there are people in the AfD who would not regard people with the wrong skin color of being able to be Germans. This is what we're talking about. So one could only wish for a strong political center in Germany, really bringing change in this regard.
It's hardly surprising why Germans are flocking to that party, considering events like this and the huge numbers of people arriving in Germany.
But Jochen, due to the inaction of the political centre, yeah.
Yeah, it is, yeah. And Jochen, just lastly, this 24-year-old asylum seeker known to the police already. And this is a story we hear so many times in the United Kingdom. Same in Germany, clearly. Apparently theft and drug offences. I mean, the question is, why was he still in the country then? Or why wasn't he behind bars? I mean, mistake after mistake, isn't it, usually?
Yeah, I'm not able to comment on this specific case because I don't know the details yet as to how long had he been in Germany already.
Sure.
But there is a pattern, which is that the asylum system and prosecution services, they are overwhelmed by the sheer number of cases they have to deal with. So we are talking about a systemic problem here that needs to be dealt with, a structural problem. It's just too many people within the asylum system, and the authorities are not able to deal with all those cases properly.
OK, Jochen Bittner, thanks so much for joining us here on Good Afternoon Britain. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Yes, we're going to be joined by a Labour MP after Keir Starmer appeared to, he was evacuated out of a housing development visit because the farmers turned up with their tractors.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 1:25. Now, as we were reporting a little bit earlier, Keir Starmer had to evacuate by helicopter a visit to a housing development. Of course, today is all about housing for the government. It's all about these new towns that are going to be building up and down the country, apparently, although we don't yet know exactly where. I don't believe these new towns are going to appear or how much they're going to cost. But anyway, the farmers turned up at what should have been a meet and greet and a nice announcement at a housing development, and they honked their horns and he had to scarper.
So we can see on our screen some of these tractors that popped up just outside Milton Keynes, perhaps the most famous new town, or I suppose we should say new city now. But shall we get reaction now from the Labour Member of Parliament for Bracknell, Peter Swallow. Peter, thanks for being with us this afternoon. It seems that the Prime Minister's announcement has gone a bit off kilter.
Well, firstly, let me just say that obviously Bracknell is the most famous new town. We're really proud to be a new town. We've just celebrated our 75th anniversary.
Congratulations, very new.
Well, yes, we're an old new town, and we're really proud of that. And you know, the fantastic opportunities that being a new town has delivered for people in Bracknell, access to green spaces, integrated transport. We have our issues, as all new towns do, but we really are a success story, and we prove why we need more new towns, and that's why I'm so delighted that the government's cracking on with its plans, and why it's so great that we've had over 100 applications for new towns come in.
We will talk more about the new towns, of course we will, because the new towns is the story of the day from the government. But just on Keir Starmer having to essentially evacuate a housing development visit because farmers turned up with their protest and their tractors, I mean, can Keir Starmer continue to ignore this issue?
I don't think he's ignoring it at all. Look, it's a fantastic...
Well, he didn't speak to them, did he?
It's a fantastic... reality of our democracy that we have, protesters making their case in this, exciting and eye-catching way. I think it's really good that we've got, we are a country that allows for peaceful protests to go on really important issues. Obviously, I'm excited to talk about new towns. But it's right that we've got the people feel that they're able to demonstrate and express their opinions on important issues.
It's just a bit of a shame because I mean I'm very interested in the government's policy on new towns. I know that, as you say, more than 100 areas have applied to become new towns. We don't quite know where they will be yet. We've got some hints from the government, but Keir Starmer was meant to talk to journalists here, and unfortunately he's not had that interview on the site because he had to leave because of the protests, and so perhaps we're not getting some of the answers that we might have done had Keir Starmer been able to speak to journalists at this event. Do you think he should have spoken to the farmers and then perhaps he would have been able to continue looking around this housing development and we could have got some answers? But because he ran away, we didn't get those answers.
Well, I know the government has been speaking to farmers for months over their concerns. Today was about and is about our plan for new towns, and it's really important that the government has been able to put forward some new details today. There's much more to come, though, and you'll know that this is something that's going to be looked at as part of the spending review in terms of the funding commitments. I know that was something that you mentioned in your intro. So, look, there'll be plenty of opportunities to question the government, I'm sure.
I must say, Peter, I was at I was reporting from the Whitehall protest where the hundreds of tractors appeared on Monday, and there were a lot of Conservatives, a lot of Reform. I didn't see one Labour MP, I don't think. Not really talking to the protesters.
I know that my colleagues, particularly those in rural communities, have been meeting with farmers in their constituency, have been, engaging really closely with them. I have to say, as a new town, Bracknell doesn't have any farms in my neck of the woods, but I know it's something that we have been working on. We've been highlighting, for example, mental health in farmers just this week in Parliament, and it's really important that we do that. Look, with our policy on land use framework and our commitments to making sure that we support food security in the UK, there are lots of issues that we need to be working with farmers on. And I know that the government is keen to listen and engage, including on areas where there is perhaps less agreement, because that's what a responsible government does.
OK, when it comes to these new towns, we're learning that they'll start to be built by the end of this Parliament. That's 4 years away. I mean, the rhetoric in the general election is that there's a housing crisis now. There's an emergency, really, in this country. People we've got record homelessness, for one. We've got people giving out more than half of their salaries in rent to be able to, frankly, have a roof over their heads. This is an emergency, and yet we're waiting for spending reviews. We're not going to learn where these new towns are. I mean, it's going to be more than a year on from the general election until we learn where these towns are, let alone the plans being submitted. There won't be spades in the ground until the end of this Parliament. Is the government acting with the urgency that they suggested was necessary on this issue?
Look, everyone will always want to go further and faster, but what I will say is, when you're building a new town, you're not just popping some extra houses in place, you're building whole communities. And it is important that we take the time to get that right, to make sure that we learn from success stories like Bracknell. We also learn where perhaps we could improve on the next generation of new towns. And alongside that, the government has immediately got rolled up its sleeves and got stuck in with unlocking some of the housing that is already in the planning system but that's become stuck. They've already unblocked 20,000 stuck homes with the potential to unlock up to 700,000 more homes stuck in the system that under the previous government were just languishing, not being built, spades not in the ground. And that is part of our plan to build 1.5 million
Peter, how much
more
is it
homes.
going to all cost us, though, all these new towns? Is it the taxpayer that's going to have to pay for all these towns? Because, I mean, the population increase is probably one of the reasons why we need all these new towns, because immigration's been so high. So how much is it going to cost us?
Well, building new towns is a sure way to get growth. It's about working with the private sector, bringing in private sector investment, and it's a sure way to make sure that we've got the money in our economy that we need to support.
So we don't know how much it's going to cost. We don't know how much yet.
Well, look, That will come at the spending review. The government's made that clear. What I will say, though, is the languishing house building that we saw under the previous government was a large part of the reason why we didn't have the growth we needed to support our public services.
Is there a political difficulty here in that building these new towns isn't just about how many towns there are, it's about where they are? And these can generate a lot of money for the taxpayer if they're built, frankly, in the southeast of England. If they're built in the north of England, they might actually cost more to build than they can sell for. So is there a risk here that politically the Chancellor might want to throw one or two new towns in an area where they're actually not going to generate any money because there isn't the same sort of housing crisis that we see in the south of England? Is there a risk that we're going to get some sort of political designations that aren't chosen for economic reasons? Or is this going to be a hard-headed economic calculation? Can you make a commitment that every new town built will actually raise money rather than costing money?
The government's been clear that it sees its New Towns programme as a vehicle for economic growth. And look, I have to say I don't have quite as pessimistic a view as you do about the north of England. I think that there are areas in the north of England which are absolutely driving that growth. But as a Southeast MP from a new town, I recognise that new towns have been a part of the success story of my region, and long may that continue.
OK, Peter Swallow, thank you very much indeed for your time. Labour MP for Bracknell, an old new town. An old new town, like Milton Keynes. I guess that's an old new town as well.
Yeah, although I hope we build them a bit.
I just worry. I mean, these type of projects, they're always so expensive for everyone, aren't they?
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Plenty more to come. Indeed, Rachel Reeves has replaced portraits of prime ministers with art. Well, do we call this art? What do you make of this? I don't know what this is. We've replaced busts and portraits with scribbles and blotches. That after your headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. 34 minutes past 1. A look at the headlines this half hour. Well, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has called for an Afghan suspect arrested in Munich to be punished and deported. He made the comments to reporters after a car ploughed into a crowd, leaving at least 28 people injured, some of them critically. German police have arrested a 24-year-old asylum seeker and detained him at the scene. Officials say he was known to police for theft and drug offences before today's incident. Authorities also say the driver was alone, but eyewitnesses reported two men in the Mini Cooper. Let's take you live to the scene now, where police have sealed off the area and confirmed there is no further danger to the public, though the cause of the crash is still under investigation. The mayor of Munich described the incident as deeply shocking, with children among the injured. And it comes just a day before the Munich Security Conference, where world leaders, including Ukraine's president, are set to gather. Back here at home, figures released earlier today showed the economy unexpectedly grew at the end of last year, but GDP per head still fell. Growth between October and December last year was 0.1%, better than expected after stagnation in the previous 3 months. The data compiled by the Office for National Statistics is, though, subject to revision. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has pledged to go further and faster with her plan to put more money in people's pockets. But the Tories accused the Labour government of killing growth. Two men accused of attacking police at Manchester Airport have today died assaulting police officers after a video of that incident went viral. 20-year-old Mohammed Amaz faces multiple charges, including causing actual bodily harm to two officers, while his brother, 25-year-old Mohammed Ahmad, is charged with injuring a male officer during the brawl at Terminal 2. A female officer suffered a broken nose at the time, and two officers remain under investigation for potential misconduct. Both men had their unconditional bail extended after they entered those not guilty pleas at Liverpool Crown Court earlier today. And Sir Keir Starmer has promised the largest house-building programme since the post-war era, with dozens of new towns built by British workers. More than 100 locations are being considered, each with at least 10,000 homes, as he vows to take on the NIMBYs and the blockers. His plans were inspired by King Charles' work on a sustainable town in Cornwall, which he visited on Monday. The move, though, has raised concerns about dragging the king into politics just days before an announcement on building beautiful communities. But the Prime Minister insists he doesn't want to involve the monarch, only to deliver homes that give working people security and stability. And just before I hand you back to Tom and Emily, good news for 3 lynx that were illegally released in the Cairngorms. They're doing well, they say, after a month in quarantine at Edinburgh Zoo. The young female cats were rescued in January after being spotted on the loose, while a 4th, a male, sadly died after capture. The zoo says they would likely not have survived in the wild and is now looking for a permanent home for them. For now, they've been named A, B and C. Perhaps you can find some better names for them, but that follows a tradition dating back to the zoo's opening in 1913. And keepers have launched an appeal to help cover costs, saying support so far has been very encouraging. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you for a full roundup at the top of the hour, and Tom and Emily will be straight back with you after this.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Another cloudy day ahead, occasional showers, but likely to see a few more brighter interludes compared to recent days, though it is still going to be remaining chilly. That's because we're still under the influence of an easterly flow across much of the country, making things feel chilly. That's away from the far southwest later, though, where we'll start to introduce some milder air. For many, though, there is still going to be plenty of cloud around, the best of the brightness across the far north and northwest of Scotland. But as I say, there should be some brighter interludes at times. That's away from the far southwest, though. We'll start to see thicker clouds spilling into parts of Cornwall, perhaps even some patchy rain later too. And temperatures just below average for the time of year, so it is going to be feeling chilly, particularly around any exposed North Sea coast where we see the brisk breeze. Now, heading into this evening and overnight, thicker clouds starting to spill into parts of Cornwall, some patchy rain arriving later. Elsewhere, it should be largely dry, plenty of cloud around, similar across Northern Ireland, a cloudy but dry end to the day. Still those clear spells clinging on to the far north and northwest of Scotland, so that's where it's going to turn particularly chilly, likely to see some frost overnight, and some showers moving into the northeast of Scotland too, where they'll likely fall as snow across hills. Now, this area of rain will continue to push its way northeastwards, moving into parts of Northern Ireland, southern parts of Wales and the southwest, where we could start to see some snow as it falls across higher ground, maybe in some freezing rain. So do take care for some icy stretches during the morning, and still some clear spells as we head into the overnight period. So once again, there could be some patchy frost, and some towns and cities just about dropping below freezing. So a chilly start for most as we head into Friday. Still cloud and outbreaks of rain slowly pushing their way northeastward. Still a chance we could see some freezing rain, so once again a risk of some icy stretches. But elsewhere, some patchy cloud, but likely to see more sunshine break through that cloud as we head into tomorrow. It is still going to be remaining chilly though, highs of around 4 to 5.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. There's disruption to some Calmac, Outer Hebrides and Firth of Clyde sailings this afternoon because of poor weather conditions. There are delays of up to an hour to Stena Line sailings between Cairnryan and Belfast for operational reasons. In East Yorkshire, the A1035 is closed northeast of Beverley between Hullbridge and Ticton after an accident. In the West Midlands, the A34 is partly blocked northbound by an accident on Walsall Road at Perry Bar, causing delays. In Gloucestershire, the A417 is blocked eastbound by an accident north of Cirencester, causing queues. The M11 from Cambridgeshire into Essex is closed southbound from junction 10 at Duxford down to 7A north of Harlow after a couple of accidents with long delays towards there and as you divert. And there's disruption to some flights to and from Belgium today because of industrial action there. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just gone 20 to 2. Now, the Chancellor has given number 11 Downing Street a major makeover. Out go portraits of past Prime Ministers. Here's a bust of the Earl of Beaconsfield, Benjamin Disraeli. But, of course, instead, we're getting abstract artworks, like this one, which is supposedly reflecting lockdown.
Well, you thought lockdown was brilliant, didn't you, Tom? So you should be celebrating these beautiful abstract artworks reflecting our life in lockdown.
I thought lockdown was necessary. I didn't think it was brilliant.
Oh, you know, it was a brilliant decision made by the government. Reflect it, no?
Oh, goodness me. Well, the Chancellor's choices have raised some eyebrows, with critics accusing her of political messaging and, frankly, bad taste. So is this a bold statement or unnecessary revisionism?
Revisionism. OK, with us now to discuss this is Associate Professor at the University of Cambridge, Professor James Orr. Professor, where do we start with this, really? The new artworks, they look a bit of a monstrosity to me.
Yeah, look, far be it from me to pass judgment on the Chancellor's artistic taste. And I actually think it's one of the most judicious decisions she's ever made. A nightmarish swirl of red ink on a sort of headless corpse is exactly what she seems to be planning to do to the country, given her first budget. Certainly red ink on the regulatory front. And she's going to be putting the country in the red for as long as she's at number 11. Look, seriously, the right often gets a bit too obsessed with the past, and the left probably gets too embarrassed about it. And it's always difficult to find that sort of, to walk the sort of tightrope in between those two. But I think there's something more to it than cultural philistinism. I think there is a sort of sense that there's a kind of a desire to repudiate the past and to sort of shake it off. You remember Starmer, one of his first decisions on arriving in number 10 was to remove busts, a beautiful painting of Shakespeare, Gladstone, Sir Walter Raleigh, Margaret Thatcher, and so on. So there is a sense that, we don't need the past. We don't need to look back to it. And I think it was suggestive that she decided to remove the bust of Disraeli. Disraeli, of course, he's well known as a great Conservative Prime Minister, but it was his government that passed the first Trade Unions Act. He was, of course, took, you might say, the more left-wing side of the Corn Laws debate in the 1840s. And so I think we know when we're in times of trouble, we should look back to the past and try to draw on it for inspiration and for ideas for how we can get ourselves out of the mess that we've got into.
James, I'm going to apologise to my producers. I'm going to ask to get that swirl of nonsense up on the screen again, because what does this perhaps say about the decision-making process? If I was forced to look at this sort of stuff, not that one. That one's lovely.
We get the red one
That's
up.
Millicent Fawcett, but we'll get this red swirl back.
Because may I just say one thing about this red one? It is titled COVID Anxiety 5, brackets mask disorder, and it's by Donna Coleman.
So if you're the Chancellor and you're writing a budget, why do you want COVID Anxiety 5 up on the wall in front of you? Does that say something about the mindset of these people?
It may well be a reflection of her current psychological state. I gather that she's had a pretty tough time of it over the last few weeks and months. Just, personally, it's a very big job. Obviously, things are not going well. That first budget didn't go down well at all. So no doubt there's some sort of projection going on there. But I think it was important for her that it was the Millicent Fawcett statue is important because, of course, she's a great sort of hero of the suffragettes. And this portrait is by a Donna...
Suffragists, not suffragettes.
Suffragists, sorry, I beg your pardon. You're absolutely right. Fawcett was a suffragist. And I think that's important. Identity is important. This is, we've got rid of the bust of this male Prime Minister. We've got rid of Disraeli. We've got rid of Lloyd George. And we've got a painting, and the painting's by a woman, and that's the most important thing about it.
Right.
And I think, I think something like that is going on, as if the sort of historical significance of these great Prime Ministers is somehow to be just laid aside because they have the wrong anatomy and chromosomes. And I just think this, if it is identity politics, it does feel rather tired and passé in 2020.
Do you know what I think? I think you're absolutely right, James. I think you're absolutely right, because, of course, Rachel Reeves has begun many a speech reminding us all that she is the first female Chancellor, which I think is a bit of identity politics at play when we've had a lot of very senior female people in positions.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think with a recession looming and our economic predicament being what it is, I just don't think the country cares very much, if it ever did, whether the Chancellor is a man or a woman.
No, I think you're right. Well, Professor James Orr, thank you very much indeed for your time on this one. We've might return to that beautiful COVID anxiety 5 mask disorder at some point.
No, absolutely. Thanks so much for being with us. I have to say, I visited Number 10 for their Christmas party, and I went to the room. This is for journalists. I'm not a personal friend of the Prime Minister. I have to just make that clear. But going to the party under the previous government and under this government, I mean, there was one that most famous portrait of Shakespeare on the wall in the room, and that was replaced with some sort of ghoulish silhouette of sort of bland nothingness. And it does really change the feel of a room. When it has sort of great Tudor portraiture, you feel like you're somewhere grand. When it has, well, frankly, sort of non-distinguished modern art, it feels less like a state of occasion. It feels a lot more clinical.
And I think modern art can be beautiful. It can be stunning, it can be thought-provoking, it can look, it can very much add to a room. But I'm not sure about these scribbles, particularly when they relate to COVID lockdowns. I mean, how miserable is that? But yes, apparently she was committed, the Chancellor that is, to removing artworks featuring male sitters and created by male artists. So there you go.
Oh, so that rules out her sticking a banana on the wall, I suppose. I was almost about to say I wouldn't be surprised if she got out that stretch of, what is it, tape, masking tape or silver tape and sticking. I think that's the most famous modern art element in the world today. But I think that the miniature statue of Millicent Fawcett, that's not a bad thing to add to a room. Don't mind that.
Why'd you have to take everything else away? I don't understand.
Yeah, it's this one that it's really just very cute. It just says something about the mindset, I would have thought.
Yeah.
Just to have this sort of chaos.
COVID anxiety 5. I'm sure you can get prints available if you so wish. But
available.
If you're
available in all good websites, I'm sure.
But if you're in search of some winter sun, here's the forecast for some top European holiday destinations.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
We have some heavy thundery rain affecting eastern parts of the Mediterranean at the moment. Meanwhile, there is also a band of rain pushing in from the west tomorrow, affecting parts of Madeira later on and pushing into the far west of Spain and Portugal as well. Also some hefty rain affecting Italy, but it's around the Adriatic coastline where we're going to have some heavy thundery downpours, even some significant snow for Croatia in particular, with 10 to 20 centimetres even to lower levels. Elsewhere, a mostly fine story.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point.
Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We were talking earlier about the issue of Siri listening to you. Well, it's not just your own conversations being sort of harvested for data. But it's a problem with AI. So what seems to have happened yesterday is that Apple issued a alert saying that Luke Littler had won the darts before he had. I mean, imagine what would, if he then gone on to lose, how that would have looked. I mean, obviously, because he went on to win, at least they got the story right. But before it had happened. So what it seems to happen is that the AI farms existing stories. And what it has done, that's the alert. We can see the alert there. Now, and it also claiming that Brazilian tennis player Rafael Nadal had come out as gay, when actually a different Brazilian tennis player was actually mentioned in the original story. So what it does is you see that's branded as BBC Sport. What the Apple AI system does is it farms alerts that it thinks people are getting from the source, and then summarises them into one alert.
It looks to me like
you would assume, OK, the BBC are reporting this.
Absolutely.
Or
so the BBC
GB News might be saying something else.
So it could happen to any news organisation.
This has highlighted a massive issue. I mean, having editorial judgment and quality control, because if this is going on, it's just contributing to the flow of misinformation.
Yes.
And we know that this is a problem on social media, people reporting false things. But if it seems to come from trusted news sources, that is a massive issue in credibility. I mean, if you had something like Reuters, who's a big news provider, doing this, you could hold people accountable, you could make changes. But when it's the AI doing it, I mean, what do? You're going to have to reprogram it in some way.
And if you just lost control, if you're a news source, you've lost control of what goes out, because it basically farms it, puts your logo on it and sends it out even when it's nonsense.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's now 7 minutes to 2 o'clock, and plenty of you have been getting in touch in what has been a busy show. Yes, Eric says, tee-hee, Starmer Scarpa's farmers. You couldn't make it up.
And the Molly says, Labour have not kept to any promises, so the houses in towns will never be built. Compulsive liars, there are a lot of them.
That's, of course, because Keir Starmer was at a new housing development just outside Milton Keynes in Buckinghamshire, an area pretty thick with farmers, and some of those farmers sort of told him where to go.
Well, he airlifted himself out of there by helicopter. Hugh says, housing crisis. Labour had 14 years to see this coming, but it is only now doing something about it.
This was, I think, the most important element of it all. I remember when they announced the new towns policy before the election, we kept asking them, where are these new towns going to be?
Just decide.
And they said, we'll wait until after the election. Why?
Just decide.
But the only reason they said wait until after the election is because if they told us where the towns would be before the election, I'm pretty sure locals would perhaps be a bit upset, and therefore they wouldn't perhaps they wouldn't have won as big a majority as they did.
Perhaps. Lots more coming up on today's show. Do not go anywhere. Of course, we're going to be bringing you the latest from Munich.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. A risk of hill snow and also some freezing rain as rain moves up from the southwest. This could bring a risk of ice, and overall it's going to be fairly chilly with some patchy frost by the morning. That's because we're still being dominated by this cold and brisk easterly flow across the country, but some milder air and some frontal systems do try to edge their way in from the south. This is going to bring some thicker areas of cloud, also some outbreaks of rain to parts of Cornwall, parts of Northern Ireland as we head into the overnight period, turning fairly windy under this cloud and rain too. Elsewhere we'll see a mix of cloud and also some clear spells, and under the clearest skies that's where things are likely to drop below zero. So this is where we'll see a patchy frost by morning, and overall it is going to be quite a chilly start as we head towards Friday. So cloud and outbreaks of rain, slowly they're edging their way in from the southwest. It's going to be feeling slightly milder here, but it's going to be quite a drab morning, likely fairly drizzly, largely dry away from this though. Quite a damp start across Northern Ireland, but to the west and northwest of Scotland, plenty of clear skies here, so likely seeing quite a widespread frost. And elsewhere, even though there's more cloud around, it's still going to be a chilly start. A few showers feeding into the northeastern parts of Scotland too, and this could bring some snow to higher ground. Now this rain and cloud will slowly try to edge its way northeastwards, but it's fairly slow moving. So away from this, there's actually going to be plenty of dry weather, perhaps even seeing some more sunshine compared to recent days too. But temperatures still just below average for the time of year, so there is still going to be a chilly feel in the air and some fairly brisk winds at times too under the cloud and rain. Then as we head further into the evening, this rain still continuing to push its way northeastwards, but there's still going to be plenty of clear skies to the east of this. So once again, a chilly night on offer, likely seeing some patchy frost and still a risk of rain and also some freezing rain in the west. And over the weekend and into the new week, still plenty of cloud and it's still feeling chilly.
A A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're doubling your chances to win in our latest Great British giveaway, with 2 fabulous prize bundles up for grabs. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. And the best news is 2 lucky winners are going to win. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. 1 entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. No, he didn't say that, though. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Thursday, the 17th of February.
17th?
I'm Tom Harwood. Oh, it's the 13th. Why, 3 doesn't even look like a 7. What's going on? I'm Tom Harwood, and I'm clearly dazed and confused.
I'm going to teach him to read in the break, don't worry. At least, well, in very sad news, at least 28 people have been injured, several critically, as a car ploughs into pedestrians in Munich, just a day before a major security conference is set to begin.
Yes, we can see live pictures here as the police have now confirmed the man arrested was 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker, adding the incident is a suspected attack. We'll have the very latest.
Yes, and elsewhere, the Great Escape. The Prime Minister receives a warm country welcome as he's forced to abandon in a helicopter a Buckinghamshire visit due to a farmer's protest. Some of the tractors there sounding musical horns while the Prime Minister spoke to workers at the site. Was this stunt justified?
And the dry desert. Yes, Saudi Arabia's UK ambassador has confirmed no alcohol whatsoever will be provided or indeed allowed during the 2034 World Cup. How much could this affect the tournament, and should the kingdom be frankly more accommodating?
And it so happens to be Valentine's Day tomorrow, Tom.
Oh!
Didn't you know? Surely you've got a date.
I don't, actually.
Well, perhaps I can be one of your Valentines.
Oh.
Because I'm not going to be here tomorrow, because I'm going to be... I'm having a day off.
Yes.
Not necessarily for Valentine's Day, although it is.
A romantic day off.
A romantic day off, because I'm going to be doing breakfast on Saturday and Sunday, so they've given me a day off. And I wanted to give you a nice little Valentine's Day card.
Oh, my goodness me. Thank you so much. Wow. OK, it says love struck.
Yeah,
and
as always.
A tasteful image of what I'm sure is an arrow.
Yes, it's an arrow that doesn't look at all phallic at all.
That's an arrow, and I'm sure that's allowed on daytime television. Forever.
Isn't that sweet?
Wow. Tom, you've written a poem?
I've written a poem, yeah.
You've written a poem?
Do you want to read it out, or shall I?
Do you want to read it out in case I get a word wrong?
Let me read it too.
OK.
Tom, happy Valentine's Day. Sharp of mind and quick of tongue, in every debate you keep me spun. But past the news and all we do, I'd rather spend the day with you.
Oh, that is... I feel slightly embarrassed that I haven't got you one in return.
That's OK, I wasn't expecting anything.
Perhaps Patrick would have something to say about it
if I
did.
might get upset. So.
I'm sure you will be getting a Valentine's Day card.
And because I know how much you like AI, it was in fact ChatGPT that wrote that poem.
I had a sneaking suspicion it might have been.
It gave me 3 verses to begin with, but I thought shorter.
That's your human augmentation. That's how we're all going to be writing everything in the future. The AI gives us, several options, and we pick the one, and then we've got some ownership over it. But thank you so much. That's very, very kind, very, very thoughtful. I'll be delighted in
don't
munching
gift
on
that to someone else.
Absolutely not. No, I mean I now
doesn't know what to say.
I now need to make some Valentine's plans. So
you do, actually, yeah.
gbnews.com/yoursay if you want to offer me any date or frankly any company at all. But we'll get to the real news after your latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Oh dear.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 2 o'clock. The top story this hour. A car has ploughed into a crowd in Munich, leaving at least 28 people injured, some of them critically. German police have arrested a 24-year-old asylum seeker who was detained at the scene. Officials say the suspect was known to police for theft and drug offences before the incident. Authorities also say the driver was alone at the time, but eyewitnesses have reported seeing 2 men in the Mini Cooper. Munich police have also sealed off the area and confirmed there is no further danger to the public, though the cause of the crash remains unclear. The mayor of Munich has described the incident today as deeply shocking, with children among those injured. It comes ahead of the Munich Security Conference, where world leaders, including Ukraine's president, are set to gather. Figures released this morning show the economy here in the UK unexpectedly grew at the end of last year, but GDP per head still fell. Growth between October and December last year was 0.1%, better than expected after stagnation in the previous 3 months. The data was compiled by the Office for National Statistics and is subject to revision. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has pledged to go further and faster with her plan to put more money in people's pockets. But the Conservatives accuse the government of killing growth. Well, let's take a quick listen then to what the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, had to say about those GDP figures earlier today.
The growth numbers have come in higher than many expected, but I'm still not satisfied with the level of growth that our economy is achieving, and that's why I am determined to go further and faster in delivering the economic growth and the improvements in living standards that our country deserves.
The NHS waiting list in England has dropped for the first month in a row, now at its lowest level since April 2023. Figures show 7.46 million treatments were waiting at the end of December. That's down slightly from November's total and well below last year's peak. Long waits are also falling. Patients waiting over a year for treatment are at their lowest since 2020. But more than 2,000 people had been waiting over 18 months, a number that has barely changed. The government aims to eliminate year-long waits by March 2025 and reduce other waits further by 2026. In London, passengers on the Elizabeth line are facing major disruption as train drivers prepare for 4 days of strikes over pay. ASLEF said its members will walk out for 24 hours on the 27th of February, March the 1st, the 8th and March the 10th. The union accuses Transport for London of failing to offer a fair pay deal. It's the latest in a long-running dispute, with Londoners warned to expect severe delays. Everton and Liverpool football clubs have condemned racist abuse aimed at Abdoulaye Doucouré after Wednesday's Merseyside derby. Police in Merseyside are investigating after the 32-year-old was targeted with abuse on social media after the 2-2 Premier League draw. Chief Superintendent Claire Doyle is also urging anyone with information to come forward. Both clubs say such abuse is reprehensible and will not be tolerated, vowing to work with police to identify those responsible. They're also calling for a zero-tolerance approach, urging social media platforms to take stronger action against abusers. The Defence Secretary has said there will be no talks about Ukraine without Ukraine involved, as John Healey insists Kyiv must be in the strongest possible position to negotiate. NATO's new Secretary-General also says any peace deal must prevent Russia from trying to seize more land in the future. It follows Donald Trump claiming he and Vladimir Putin had agreed to start talks on ending the war immediately.
We'll see what that means. I think when the war ends, one thing he was very strong about, if it ends, he wants it to end. And that's President Putin said that. He wants it to end. He doesn't want to end it and then go back to fighting 6 months later. We talked about the possibility, I mentioned it, of a ceasefire so we can stop the killing, and I think we'll probably end up at some point getting a ceasefire in the not-too-distant future. President Putin wants to have peace now, and that's good. And he didn't want to have peace with Biden. And you tell me why that is, okay?
Those are the latest headlines for now. I'm just looking to see if there have been any takers for a date with Tom on Valentine's Day. Sadly, no emails just yet. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 2. Now, returning to the news over in Munich. Nearly 30 people have been injured, with 2 in critical condition after a car ploughed through a large crowd in what police are saying is a suspected attack.
Yes, the arrested driver has now been confirmed as a 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker known to police.
Well, in the last few minutes, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has condemned the incident as a terrible attack. He added the suspect must be punished and leave the country.
OK, well, joining us now is national reporter Charlie Peters, who's been following developments. Charlie, what do we know?
Well, the US Vice President J.D. Vance has arrived in Munich in the last hour, ahead of the Munich Security Conference, where 5,000 officers are on duty to keep that conference safe. And while the police have stressed this afternoon that this suspected attack that occurred at 10:30 local time this morning is not linked to the conference in any way, it's undoubtedly the worst that they could have expected to happen. This is among their worst fears for the security situation. Another of these appalling car ramming incidents taking place on the eve of the Munich Security Conference. They've said that they have very, very high protection standards, but they've stressed there's no such thing as 100% security, as sadly many people on the Striedelstrasse in Munich have experienced today. Just a kilometre north of the central train station, where this morning it's been reported that a Mini Cooper accelerated after overtaking a police car before hitting crowds of people gathering on a rally for the Verdi trade union, the second largest trade union in Germany. The police investigation is now taking place to clarify why this detained suspect, a 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker, made that decision to accelerate and overtake the police car before driving into that crowd. Up to 30 people injured, some of them critically. Eyewitnesses saying that a woman and a child were seen underneath the car, but also there were reports that a man was also underneath that vehicle. We've also been told that when the man was detained, there were a few gunshots from the German police, a marksman firing at the windscreen of that Mini Cooper, which, if we've seen it on the street, it is in a very damaged state. It's very clear that something high velocity has gone into that windscreen. We're told by the police that they fired into it. before they were able to retrieve and detain that 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker from the driver's seat. There are also other eyewitness accounts, several that have not been commented on by the police, that there was another man in that car, 2 men up front in this vehicle. So local reports are saying up to 30 injured. Several ambulances were on site this morning after the suspected attack. A child's life is in danger. At least 2 people are said to be very seriously injured. There was also a report, which we've not had any further comments on since it was released from Süddeutsche, a daily newspaper in the Bavarian southern region of Germany, that 1 woman had died and several others were hurt around her, but we've not had any confirmation of that report. And when it comes to the suspect of this suspected attack, we've also been told by the German authorities that this 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker was known to the police for drug and theft offences.
Right, well, thank you very much indeed, Charlie Peters, for that comprehensive report. Of course, as we learn more about any potential motivation, we'll have you right back with us. We're going to move on now because figures released this morning show the economy unexpectedly grew by 0.1% at the end of last year. But, of course, crucially per head, GDP was down.
And that's the sort of quality of life indicator, isn't it? How much money people actually have individually. Now, growth between October and December last year was 0.1%, better than expected after stagnation in the previous 3 months. OK.
Well, let's get the lowdown with our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, the government is claiming that this is good news. I suppose we've avoided that technical recession. But on the per capita measure, we really haven't.
No, exactly. The government trying to put a positive spin on this. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, says that she wants to go further and faster, putting money into people's pockets. But of course, the growth between October and December was only 0.1%. That is absolutely tiny. The economy was totally flat in the 3 months before that since Labour came to power. The first half of the year, the economy was growing, and according to the Conservatives, that was the fastest growth in the G7. Though worth saying, the economy has done pretty poorly now for, well, very many years, really, since the financial crisis. But as you say, GDP per capita is actually down in that period by 0.01%. So that's the amount that the economy is making, that each of us are effectively making. That is how ultimately we get to be made better off. If we're producing more, if individually there's more, then there's more money for public services, and so on and so forth. And I think it's really interesting that before the government were elected, Rachel Reeves said back in 2023, we will measure the annual rate of GDP per capita. Now, they are not doing that. That's not, of course, the headline figure that we get from the ONS. But, of course, ultimately, it is all about making us feel better off. The government promised change. They said that we're going to have the highest growth in the G7, something I think really out of their control, given that they can't control the economic output of the 6 other countries in the G7, but they are on a mission to get growth. 6 months on, absolutely no sign of it. But the build, baby, build rhetoric, the housing plans, the British Steel being used at Heathrow, a nod in that direction. But of course, that's going to take quite a long time to filter through.
And Catherine, just hearing that you are actually set to fly to Munich ahead of the security conference tomorrow, is that right?
Yes, I will be rushing off straight after this to go to Munich because, of course, we've had the horrific attack there today. They seem to come around all too often in Europe, don't they, especially in Germany. But also, of course, leaders gathering in Munich from tomorrow for the Munich Security Conference. These things happen on a regular basis, but this one feels really, really different. Volodymyr Zelensky will be there from Ukraine. J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States. We are sending the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, the Defence Secretary, John Healey. All the talk, of course, will be about what Donald Trump means for Europe. They've made it very clear that they are sick of what they see basically as Europe freeloading off the US, not paying enough for its own defence. They've pretty much signalled we could be on our own in the not too distant future. And they've also, of course, with Trump's 90-minute phone call to Vladimir Putin yesterday, said that they want the war to end. Well, of course, everybody wants the war to end, but what is the price going to be? It does feel at the moment like it seems to be a decision that the United States is making, that the Ukraine leader doesn't seem to have much hand in. Now, one thing on which everyone is united is they want an end to the fighting, but how much territory will Ukraine have to give up to get that?
Catherine Forster, we'll look forward to speaking to you from Munich tomorrow, and what a significant conference it will be in the light of this attack. Please do stay safe.
OK, well, now to continue our discussion about, well, the personal recession, isn't it, really? As we were saying, Chairman of Growth Commission, Shankar Singham, is with us. Thank you very much indeed, Shankar. As we were pointing out, yes, a tiny little bit of growth overall in the last quarter, but we don't feel any richer.
No, that's right. So essentially, GDP has increased by 0.1%, but the Prime Minister has made it very clear that he wants to increase household income, which is best proxied by GDP per capita, as you noted in your segment. That has fallen by 0.1% in the last quarter. I think that there's some significant issues here. One is the reason that you've got GDP going up by 0.1% and GDP per capita going down by 0.1% is almost entirely the population increase. You know, we're adding 1 million a year to the population. Most of that, almost all of that, is immigration. And if you drill down underneath the figures, you see that private sector activity has actually declined even under the GDP 0.1% increase. The actual private sector contribution to that is down.
That is crucial, Shankar, because that's the bit that pays for the public sector.
Yes.
So the bit that generates the tax is actually smaller, and the bit that eats up the tax and the borrowing, that's the only bit that's growing.
Yes, exactly. So what your viewers sort of should understand about the GDP number is it does include government spending. So it's not just private activity, it's also government spending. And GDP per capita also includes government spending. So government spending is up. I mean, in the Growth Commission, we've now done 3 budgets for the UK. Our comment, we think you could, if you do the right things, increase GDP per capita of the UK by about 26% over the next 20 years, so a little bit more than 1% over the trend line. But that requires a lot of regulatory reform. It requires a lot of tax reform. Some serious things that need to be done. After the autumn budget, we assumed that the government would succeed on their planning reform, which is a big driver of growth. And all the other things, even with the planning reform, contributed to what we felt was going to be about a -8% GDP per capita change over the next 20 years. It's interesting that the last 2 quarters, the last half year, is almost exactly on that track.
Oh, great. I mean, Shankar, properly depressing if that's our trajectory. So we're just going to be feeling poorer and poorer if things don't radically change. I mean, we've got this spending review. We know Rachel Reeves is very worried about the lack of money. We're hearing that all this headroom has disappeared. We're hearing sort of rumours that potentially Rachel Reeves could decide to go after things like cash ISAs. I mean, we're at that point now. Shankar, where does she go from here?
Well, I think you're going to see an emergency, if you don't want to call it a budget, an emergency statement of some kind towards the end of March. And what we would recommend that the Chancellor do is have a long, hard look at some of the growth-killing measures in the last budget, particularly the tax increases, particularly things like frankly, Great British Energy, Great British Nuclear, these are state-supported organisations that are going to cut private sector contribution to the economy. Full planning reform, not just tweaking the edges of planning reform. So they're going to have to look at the role of statutory consultees. They're going to have to look at judicial review. They're going to have to look at zonal planning. So massive changes. I mean, almost a repeal of the Town and Country Planning Act is really what is required on an emergency basis. And I think also all the subsidies that are being paid for renewable energy in pursuit of net zero targets, all of that will have to be looked at. And I think I still think you can generate increased growth in the UK. We're going to have to look, if the president of the US, Donald Trump, does impose tariffs beyond the steel and aluminium tariffs we've just seen, if he imposes those generally across the board, that is going to be a further hit to the UK economy. And I expect that Trump is quite predisposed to offer a trade deal of some kind to the UK, which I would strongly urge the government to take up, because I think that's what will generate, the conditions for the kind of regulatory reform that frankly we need to see.
Yeah, that would be the big booster. But frankly, would this government accept chicken that's been washed in chlorine in our shops?
God forbid. Shankar Singham, thank you very much.
Personally, I love American chicken, but
they wouldn't have to. We've already signed the chapter that the Americans would put on the table in that area of SPS.
Oh, really?
It's already been ported over from the CPTPP, which we've just signed. And all it will say is that we commit to sound science in our agricultural regulations and basically much as what the WTO says.
That's really, really interesting. Well, Shankar Singham, but perhaps this US-UK trade deal isn't a pipe dream after all. But Chairman of the Growth Commission, really appreciate your time this afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
God, I'm fed up. Anyway. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Yes, Keir Starmer, he says Ukraine must be at the heart of negotiations, as Trump insists there is a good possibility of ending the war. We're going to get the views of the former head of the British Army in just 1 moment. Stay with us.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
A woman of 53 has believed for 18 months she was in an online relationship with Brad Pitt.
I think we're seeing pictures. So these are the pictures that she received that made her believe that she was in this relationship with Brad Pitt.
And you'll see that some of it is in hospital because the scammer was claiming that he was suffering from cancer. This was playing very much on her emotion. So this is a divorcee who lived in Mauritius. She'd received a £700,000 divorce settlement, or £650,000 divorce settlement, I should say, and £700,000 has been taken from her through this scam.
Yeah.
As she was becoming, every time she became suspicious, the money was taken for payment of charges on gifts that she never received, and then hospital fees. There was lots of emotions being played into there. Now, as somebody, I'm a rom-com writer by trade, so I write romantic fiction. One of the books I've written has actually been about somebody who did online dating, got herself into a whole heap of trouble. Not quite, she wasn't in a relationship with Brad Pitt, but she met somebody dodgy. So because I've written that book, I've met a lot of people who've come up to me and said, oh, it's happened to me.
It's scary in this digital age, isn't it?
They've lost $700,000, but somebody has tried it on. Somebody my question is, would a man go 18 months in a relationship online without seeing somebody and keep it going? Or is this feeding into this neediness of a particular demographic of a woman who that's better than anything else she'd got going on in her life, was what was being fed to her over the internet? I just find
and then maybe a little bit of her knew, but she kind of just suppressed it because she
was hoping it was Brad Pitt.
Her daughter apparently for a year was saying, this can't be true, come on, think about it. But she just fell for it. But I just wonder, what strikes me, it's a very sad story. She's obviously now getting a lot of hate and ridicule as well.
Because she's been on French TV and she's had a huge amount of pushback from it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference
It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 26 minutes past 2, and President Trump of the United States says he and Vladimir Putin of the Russian Federation have agreed to start negotiations on ending the war in Ukraine. This after a lengthy and highly productive phone call.
We'll see what that means. I think when the war ends, one thing he was very strong about, if it ends, he wants it to end. And that's President Putin said that. He wants it to end. He doesn't want to end it and then go back to fighting 6 months later. We talked about the possibility, I mentioned it, of a ceasefire so we can stop the killing, and I think we'll probably end up at some point getting a ceasefire in the not-too-distant future. President Putin wants to have peace now, and that's good. And he didn't want to have peace with Biden.
Was that conversation with Putin?
And you tell me why that is, okay?
And there's quite a stark difference of approach between us here in the United Kingdom and the United States. The UK is vowing to continue their steadfast support for Ukraine. Keir Starmer's saying we must make sure Ukraine is at the heart of any negotiation. Donald Trump appears to see things quite differently.
Well, joining us now is the former head of the British Army, Lord Dannatt. Lord Dannatt, thanks so much for joining us. This is a bit of a conundrum. Will the Ukrainians, frankly, accept what appears could be a bit of a negotiation over their heads?
Well, I don't think they will for one moment accept a negotiation over their head, and frankly, neither should they. I think from what we understand of the conversation that went on between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in the last 24 hours is that Trump, in beginning the negotiation, has made two very major concessions already towards Vladimir Putin. He has conceded that Ukraine will not join NATO, or indeed any time soon, but actually probably not at all. And secondly, he seems to have accepted, through the words of Defense Secretary Hesketh, that the territory that Russia has seized in eastern Ukraine and indeed Crimea will remain in their hands. So he's beginning a negotiation with Putin, having conceded two major issues already. So I'm not surprised that Volodymyr Zelensky is extremely fed up with what is going on, apparently in his name, but over his head.
But Lord Dannatt, this war coming up to 2 years now since Russia illegally invaded Ukraine. It's been a hugely deadly war. Does one side need to win outright for this to come to an end, or is it that there does need to be a settlement that comes from other powers outside the conflict?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's a hugely wasteful, costly war in terms of blood and treasure. Far too many people have been killed. And yes, we do need to get a ceasefire and an end to the killing as soon as possible. But frankly, it can't, in all conscience, be on any terms. And if to pick up your other point, this is not going to result in victory for one side or another. There is de facto stalemate on the battlefield at the present time. So ceasefire is one thing, to stop the killings is another thing. Both of those are important. But then there need to be detailed, considered conversations and discussions that go on to lay the foundations for a lasting peace. And frankly, that should include Russia being put under pressure. And don't forget, Russia is under quite a lot of pressure. Sanctions are biting. Their cash rate has been huge. Over 700,000 killed and wounded during the course of this war. The economy is not in a great situation. Putin must feel that he's under pressure and not being given inducements, if you like, such as that Donald Trump was talking about yesterday. And a suggestion of Ukraine not joining NATO and Russia being able to keep the land it's illegally seized, that's not a great way to start a negotiation. And you have to remember that Donald Trump's track record on these negotiations is not great. It was he who started the negotiation with the Taliban that led to the quite unnecessary and precipitate withdrawal of American and international forces from Afghanistan in August 2021 that has condemned most ordinary Afghans to a pretty miserable life.
Well, that was President Joe Biden's decision to follow through with that. We don't know what Donald Trump would have done.
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
We don't.
We were talking over each other.
Sorry, President Joe Biden made that decision fundamentally, and we don't know what Donald Trump would have done had he still been in power at that point, do we?
I think you're misinformed there. Donald Trump did the negotiations with the Taliban in Qatar and had agreed that US and international forces would have left Afghanistan by the end of August, beginning of September 2021, and all Joe Biden did was go along with what his predecessor had agreed. That's a historical fact.
Of course, this all plays into what might happen in a very new, perhaps a brave new world of international relations. We had sort of an understanding pretty much from the end of the Second World War through to today that if you try and bite a chunk out of another country, that's sort of unacceptable in the world today. And yet here we might find President Vladimir Putin being given a reward for waging a brutal war. It may well be that the entirety of eastern Ukraine is cut off from sea access, that Putin can keep his sort of arc of territory around the east of the country down to Crimea. And if so, what does that say to other countries who think about having a nibble out of their neighbours?
Well, I'm not sure about other countries, but I think what it says to Vladimir Putin, if he is allowed to get away with this, and it may well be that he does, if you take Donald Trump at his recent words, that we in the West have got to take a greater share of responsibility for the collective security of Western Europe. We've got to make sure that we increase our defence capability considerably to have a deterrent capability that Vladimir Putin will take note of. Frankly, if there's a ceasefire without any form of reasonable settlement, over the next 2 or 3 years, the Russians will reconstitute their armed forces, and having enjoyed the success that they will have had in Ukraine, what's to stop them having a nibble, as you use the expression, at one of the Baltic states or Poland or Finland or Sweden? And just think of it, why Finland and Sweden joined NATO at this time in their history? Because they're worried about Russian expansion. And you can't blame them for wanting to come underneath the umbrella of Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty.
Mm. Well, Lord Dannett, Richard Dannett, thanks so much for joining us and talking through what is it's a pretty new time, pretty scary time in international relations.
Yeah, I think most people want an end to the war, that's for sure, just different ways of getting there. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show. Yes, the shocking story of a Nigerian woman who joined a terror organisation to apparently boost her UK asylum claim. And guess what? It worked. That's after the headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. Just after 2:30, the top story this afternoon. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has called for an Afghan suspect arrested today in Munich to be punished and deported. He made those comments after a car ploughed into a crowd, leaving at least 28 people injured, some of them critically. German police have arrested a 24-year-old asylum seeker who was detained at the scene this morning. Officials say the suspect was known to the police for theft and drug offences. Authorities also say the driver was alone, but eyewitnesses had reported seeing 2 men in the Mini Cooper. Well, let's take you live now to the scene where police have sealed off the area of the incident and confirmed at this stage there is no further danger to the public, though the cause of the crash remains unclear. The mayor of Munich described the incident as deeply shocking, with children among the injured. It comes just days before the Munich Security Conference, where world leaders will be attending, including Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. In other news, figures released this morning show the economy in the UK unexpectedly grew at the end of last year, but GDP per head still fell. Growth between October and December last year was 0.1%, better than expected after stagnation in the previous 3 months. The data was compiled by the ONS and is subject to revision. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has pledged to go further and faster with her plan to put more money in people's pockets. But the Tories accused the Labour government of killing growth. Two men accused of attacking police at Manchester Airport have denied assaulting police officers after a video of the incident went viral. 20-year-old Mohammed Ahmaz faces multiple charges, including causing actual bodily harm to two officers, while his brother, 25-year-old Mohammed Ahmad, is charged with injuring a male officer during the brawl. A female officer suffered a broken nose at the time, and two officers remain under investigation for potential misconduct. Both men had their unconditional bail extended after they entered those not guilty pleas earlier today. Sir Keir Starmer has promised the largest house building programme since the post-war era, with dozens of new towns built by British workers. More than 100 locations are being considered, each with at least 10,000 homes, as he vows to take on the NIMBYs and the blockers, he says. The plans were inspired by King Charles's work on a sustainable town in Cornwall. The move has raised concerns, though, about dragging the King into politics just days before an announcement on building so-called beautiful communities. But the Prime Minister insists he doesn't want to involve the monarch, only to deliver homes that give working people security and stability. And 3 lynx illegally released in the Cairngorms are doing well after a month in quarantine at Edinburgh Zoo. The young female cats were rescued in January after being spotted on the loose, while a male, sadly died after capture. The zoo says they would likely not have survived in the wild and is now looking for a permanent home for them. For now, they've been named A, B and C, following a tradition dating back to the zoo's opening in 1913. And keepers have also launched an appeal to help cover costs, saying support so far has been very encouraging. That's it from me for this afternoon. Sophia Wensler will have a full roundup at the top of the hour, and Tom and Emily will, of course, be straight back with you after this.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Another cloudy day ahead, occasional showers, but likely to see a few more brighter interludes compared to recent days, though it is still going to be remaining chilly. That's because we're still under the influence of an easterly flow across much of the country, making things feel chilly. That's away from the far southwest later, though, where we'll start to introduce some milder air. For many, though, there is still going to be plenty of cloud around, the best of the brightness across the far north and northwest of Scotland. But as I say, there should be some brighter interludes at times. That's away from the far southwest, though. We'll start to see thicker clouds spilling into parts of Cornwall, perhaps even some patchy rain later too. And temperatures just below average for the time of year, so it is going to be feeling chilly, particularly around any exposed North Sea coast where we see the brisk breeze. Now, heading into this evening and overnight, thicker clouds starting to spill into parts of Cornwall, some patchy rain arriving later. Elsewhere, it should be largely dry, plenty of cloud around, similar across Northern Ireland, a cloudy but dry end to the day. Still those clear spells clinging on to the far north and northwest of Scotland, so that's where it's going to turn particularly chilly, likely to see some frost overnight, and some showers moving into the northeast of Scotland too, where they'll likely fall as snow across hills. Now, this area of rain will continue to push its way northeastwards, moving into parts of Northern Ireland, southern parts of Wales and the southwest, where we could start to see some snow as it falls across higher ground, maybe in some freezing rain. So do take care for some icy stretches during the morning, and still some clear spells as we head into the overnight period. So once again, there could be some patchy frost, and some towns and cities just about dropping below freezing. So a chilly start for most as we head into Friday. Still cloud and outbreaks of rain slowly pushing their way northeastward. Still a chance we could see some freezing rain, so once again a risk of some icy stretches. But elsewhere, some patchy cloud, but likely to see more sunshine break through that cloud as we head into tomorrow. It is still going to be remaining chilly though, highs of around 4 to 5.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. There's disruption to some Calmac, Outer Hebrides and Firth of Clyde sailings this afternoon because of poor weather conditions. There are delays of up to an hour to Stena Line sailings between Caroline and Belfast because of operational reasons. In East Yorkshire, the A1035 is closed in both directions along Hull Bridge Road to the east of Beverley after an accident. Now in Flintshire, the A541 is blocked by an accident at Reedham Moyen, causing queues. In Gloucestershire on the A417, there's a lane closed southbound after an accident between the Daglingworth turnoff and Cirencester, causing queues. On the M4 in Wiltshire, there's a lane closed eastbound after an accident near to junction 16. west of Swindon, with delays towards and past there. And there's disruption to some flights to and from Belgium today because of industrial action there. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's now 20 minutes to 3, and a woman who joined a terror organisation in Nigeria, well, she's been given asylum in the United Kingdom.
Yes, the 49-year-old, well, she tried and failed 8 times to secure asylum in this country and was only given the right to stay once she joined the separatist group called the Indigenous People of Biafra. Well, no, not me either.
Of course, as well as being a separatist organisation, it's a terror group. So let's discuss this with the criminal defence lawyer, Paul Britton, because, Paul, please help us make sense of this.
I mean, look, it is a terrorist group defined in Nigeria, but not a terrorist group defined in UK law. Biafra was a state that only existed for about 3 years and now forms part of what we know as Nigeria. The Nigerian national came to the UK in 2011, made a few asylum claims between that date and joining this Indigenous People of Biafra group. Even though the judge in the most recent decision found that she only joined that group to bolster her claim for asylum, so the judge accepts that it wasn't true and it was fake. The judge has said, but if you go back, there is still a risk that you will be in danger. I mean, the individual herself has said that she fears that she'll disappear, basically. And so the judge has said, well, on that basis, there's a legitimate fear and you should be allowed to stay on your 8th application. Now, this is an appeal judge, so the government have to respond. Keir Starmer has publicly said that the decision is wrong. I always think it's a bit naughty for politicians to wade into judicial systems and make those sort of determinations, particularly so early, because we do have the separation of powers. What would have been more sensible was to say that the government will look at this decision and respond appropriately. The appropriate response will probably be what we call a judicial review. The government has 3 months to make that application, and it will be on probably the basis that there was unfairness maybe in the system, some sort of irregularity, but it's very narrow.
Will her lawyer representing her have helped her come up with this?
Creative.
Because very creative. Tried and failed 8 times. Now suddenly she joins a terrorist organisation in Nigeria. The judge here accepts that that was bogus, but because there's a possibility that because she said she was, she might. I mean, it's just ridiculous, Paul.
I mean, if a lawyer has advised to do that, that's outrageous. You know, that really crosses the line. If she joined it of her own fruition and thought, well, I'll join this terrorist group, I don't see. Yeah, what's funny is that it must have been very premeditated. You know, she joins the group, distances herself from it, and then says, "Well, if I go back, that same group will attack me." You know, in Nigeria, the group that we're talking about are involved in what's defined as guerrilla warfare with the government. So they are a seriously not pleasant group to get on the wrong side of.
Nigeria and the United Kingdom are bound by the same conventions that we've signed up to at the United Nations. The Refugee Convention means that we have to accept people who claim asylum on our soil and that we accept their claim. But also it means that the countries that they leave have to take them back if we say no. How can someone in this country claim not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, not 5 times, 6 times, or 7 times, but on the 8th time after 7 no's, why on earth was she still here?
Also, sorry, just one more thing. Also, if anyone from Nigeria who happens to be part of this terror group makes their way to the United Kingdom, will they have exactly the same claim to be able to stay here for asylum because they'll risk it?
Let's deal with that first. That's the most frightening thing, because does this now set a precedent in law where anyone that has similar circumstances, whether they're bona fide or not, will now be able to make an application for asylum and it will be granted, relying on this case as case law? That's the frightening part. What was your part, Tom?
Sorry.
How on earth does someone go through so many different fields?
Yes.
Surely if you say no, you can't have asylum, you leave.
That's a very good point. So, if new evidence becomes available that wasn't available for the first go at it, you can then make a new application.
Oh, it's so transparent, Paul. It's so transparent that these people are abusing a system. No one would set up a system
So
to
she
work like
orchestrated or contrived some new facet, which would have been the joining of this group. She may have, we don't know, but she may have made an application, being part of it, and then made another application saying that she's distanced herself from it. But the judges all seem to agree, at every stage, that she has made it up and that she doesn't actually hold a true belief.
What are the judges playing at? I know we're not allowed to say anything about the judges and all of this.
Because it's the law.
I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry, but they don't have to interpret it in this way. They really, really don't.
The law
it's like
says
the
if there's a
chicken nugget
risk...
story, like the Gazan resettlement through the Ukraine scheme.
The paedophiles who need access to their own children in this country, otherwise they'd have...
Crazy.
It just seems that there is an example after an example after an example of this system. It is fundamentally broken.
And in the background, the cost of it, and the last figures were about 1.4 billion. Yes, you can understand why the public are becoming increasingly frustrated with it.
Oh, now you're just trying to upset us.
I know.
Paul Britton, thank you very much indeed. You're a criminal defence lawyer. Thank you for talking us through that so calmly.
Well, goodness me, if you want to get away from some of this, genuinely, my head is scrambled with the mess that our asylum system is, and perhaps we should all get away from it, getting some winter sun. So here's the forecast of those top European holiday destinations.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
We have some heavy thundery rain affecting eastern parts of the Mediterranean at the moment. Meanwhile, there is also a band of rain pushing in from the west tomorrow, affecting parts of Madeira later on and pushing into the far west of Spain and Portugal as well. Also some hefty rain affecting Italy, but it's around the Adriatic coastline where we're going to have some heavy thundery downpours, even some significant snow for Croatia in particular, with 10 to 20 centimetres even to lower levels. Elsewhere, a mostly fine story.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just gone 10-3. Now, football fans heading to the 2034 World Cup in Saudi Arabia won't be able to grab a beer, or any alcohol for that matter, whilst at the competition. The Saudi ambassador has said that their culture would not be changed for others.
OK, joining us now to discuss this is author of I'm Never Drinking Again, Dom McGregor. Dom, what do you reckon to this? Are people being shafted?
Not really, no. I think, as Tom just said there, respecting someone's culture is quite important. We would expect people that come to the UK to respect our culture. So I think it's a good thing, and really the emphasis should be on the football, not on the drinking. So I'm very pro it.
Of course you're pro it. You don't drink.
But I used to drink, and I've been to many football tournaments. I was at the Euro 20 final in Wembley when I saw a lot of drunken people cause a lot of damage in the UK. So I've seen actually the damage that alcohol can have at football events. So as someone who used to drink quite a lot, I know how much it can impact people, so that's why I'm pro it.
Dom, do you think some fans will take the same view? We do know that a lot of football fans, like a few pints, don't they?
Oh, of course they do, and it's not about people not being able to enjoy themselves. Look, you're going to be in beautiful sunshine. You're going to be watching some great football, so the focus should be on the football, not actually, oh my God, I need to have a couple of drinks here. This is exactly what I need. So from my perspective, respecting someone's culture and actually enjoying the main principal element of the tournament is a good thing.
And yet, to some people, to many people, the culture of football is tied up with the culture of pubs and of having a pint and all the rest of it. I mean, there is something intrinsically linked here. I mean, frankly, we invented the sport, we invented the pub. If Saudi Arabia is to sort of try to become a new home of football, as they are with all of their investments, shouldn't they accept a bit of the culture of football in that turn?
To be honest, I don't think so. I think as British people, we wouldn't want people to come over here and respect our culture. We don't want people coming over here and they don't, exactly. So why would we want people to respect our culture? And when we go abroad and Brits abroad are a problem in general, why would we try and enforce our culture on them?
I think we're perfectly charming abroad. I know what you mean. Dom McGregor, thank you very much indeed, author of I'm Never Drinking Again. Interested to know what people think at home. I think there's a mixture of views. A lot of you have been getting in touch saying, they have every right to protect their culture. There are rules in Saudi Arabia, not for Brits to decide what those rules are. But it's interesting the other way around sometimes.
Yeah, look, I'm not saying turn Mecca into a boozer. But I am saying that it's lovely to have Chinatown in the middle of Soho in London and actually in many cities across the UK. So there can be a little area of another country and that's nice, that's charming.
Yeah, they do that in a lot of Muslim countries, don't they?
Yeah, why can't they do that with the football?
Right, well, it's Martin Daubney up next. He'll be with you till 6.
Who has no views at all on football, I can assure you.
I'm not here tomorrow, but I'm back on Saturday breakfast.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. A risk of hill snow and also some freezing rain as rain moves up from the southwest. This could bring a risk of ice, and overall it's going to be fairly chilly with some patchy frost by the morning. That's because we're still being dominated by this cold and brisk easterly flow across the country, but some milder air